12 years ago, a young woman in the mountains of Virginia vanished from her own home in the middle of a rainy night, disappearing without leaving any trace, causing her family to collapse and the community to fall into panic. Authorities quickly suspected the husband, who was also the last person to see her alive, of being involved in the disappearance, but with no body found and only very few clues to follow, the investigation gradually reached a deadlock. However, in the years that followed, a group of cold case investigators never gave up, clinging to the hope that one day new technology would reveal what they had missed back in 2013. And then, one morning in 2022, while reviewing old data that seemed useless, they noticed a small detail that had been hidden for nearly a decade, a detail that changed the entire case and shocked everyone involved in a way no one could have expected. Before diving deep into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to continue joining us. On the evening of October 3, 2013, in the northern edge of Augusta County, Virginia, the Mercer family home on Pilot Hill Road gradually sank into the soft golden light that every autumn brings. Lena Mercer, 29 years old, left her office in Staunton later than usual after finishing a project that was nearing its deadline. She sent a final text message to her brother Evan at 8:17 p.m., saying she would stop by their parents' house to pick up some things before heading home. Security cameras at a Waynesboro gas station recorded her silver Subaru Forester refueling at 8:42. Lena appeared normal, with no signs of stress. Around 9:15 p.m., her car pulled up in front of the Mercer home. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Ruth Halden, saw Lena walk from the car to the porch, carrying a bag of documents in her coat. The house lights turned on a few minutes later. No one recorded any further notable movement for the rest of the evening. Lena's phone sent its last signal from the cell tower near Mount Solon at 10:06, with a steady ping in the area of her home. It was cold, no rain, light wind, and no unusual traffic or noises reported by neighbors. By the morning of October 4th, Lena did not show up at the office. Colleagues tried contacting her multiple times, but only reached voicemail. Her parents assumed Lena was resting at home after the late work night. But by 11 a.m., her father, Mr. Daniel Mercer, drove over to check and found the house door locked, Lena's car still parked in the driveway, and absolute silence inside. He knocked multiple times with no response, called his daughter, but heard the ring coming from inside the house, indicating her phone was still there. Anxiety grew as the parents used a spare key to enter. The ground floor was tidy, with no signs of struggle. Lena's document bag was on the table. Her coat was neatly hung on the hook, but there was no sign of her. The bed showed no signs of being used. The glass of water on the kitchen counter was still full, and Lena's wallet, along with her ID and bank cards, was in the drawer by the door. There was no note, no indication Lena had left voluntarily. When checking the backyard and the area bordering the woods, the family found no traces. Lena's disappearance became inexplicably abnormal because her car, phone, and personal belongings were all intact. By 12:28 p.m., after hours of searching around the house and contacting everyone with no results, the Mercer family had to accept that Lena's disappearance could no longer be seen as temporary or a misunderstanding. They officially called the Augusta County Sheriff's Office hotline to report the missing person. When the call was transferred to dispatch around 12:30 p.m. on October 4, 2013, the operator immediately classified it as a missing adult, unusual circumstances case, based on the initial information that Lena had left behind all her personal belongings along with her means of transportation. Just 14 minutes later, the first response unit, consisting of a deputy and a patrol investigator, arrived at the Mercer home on Pilot Hill Road. They noted Lena's silver Subaru Forester parked neatly at the edge of the driveway, with no signs of collision, no fresh mud, and no change in tire position compared to Mr. Daniel Mercer's description. The vehicle compartments were opened and quickly checked. No keys in the car, no phone in the seat pockets, clean trunk, no strange odors, no suspicious items. The response team shifted to inspecting the house. The front door showed no signs of forced entry. Contact with the lock surface revealed no scratches or forceful impact. Inside, the ground floor was so tidy, it seemed as if Lena had just stepped into the house and then vanished from the normal sequence. Her document bag was placed on the table next to the sofa, unopened, laptop still in its bag, wallet, Idaho card, bank cards placed in a small wooden box by the door, exactly where Lena usually kept them. No signs of struggle, furniture not displaced, no items scattered. The kitchen area showed a full glass of water on the counter, clean ceramic plates, dried under a towel, no signs of dinner preparation. Investigators noted no food warmed in the microwave, nor any leftovers. The upstairs continued to provide no leads, bed neatly made, blankets not pulled out, night clothes still in the drawer, bathroom dry, indicating no use since the previous evening. Towels still hung in their old folds. The only point marked for further review was Lena's phone found in the living room. On the small table near the window, battery still over half, no outgoing or incoming calls after 10:06 the previous night. Evan Mercer arrived at the house while the response team was completing initial documentation. He was 26 years old, living about 20 minutes drive away, and said he had seen Lena's last message at 8:17 p.m., with no further contact afterward. Investigators took preliminary statements on site. Evan said that on the evening of October 3rd, he did not visit because he was busy preparing documents for a meeting the next morning. When asked about Lena's travel habits, Evan said his sister rarely left the house after 10 p.m., especially after a long workday. He confirmed Lena had no plans to leave town, no mention of going out that evening, and no reason to leave the house without her car and phone. When asked to describe Lena's mental state and behavior in the previous week, Evan said she was a bit tired due to a heavy work schedule, but had no personal conflicts or particular stress. The investigator asked further about recent relationships. Evan replied that Lena had no boyfriend, no issues with colleagues, and had never disappeared or left home without notice before. Police noted Evan's cooperation, but also flagged points for verification. 1. The communication timeline between the siblings. 2. Evan's location from 7 p.m. to the next morning. 3. Anyone who might have visited the Mercer home on the evening of the incident. After completing the basic inspection, the investigator ordered the area around the house sealed within a 30-meter radius to ensure no disturbance of outdoor traces. The backyard soil showed no clear footprints or disturbances, but heavy fallen leaves made visual observation more difficult. All windows were closed from the inside, with no signs of unauthorized opening. A sweep of the fence line and wooded border revealed no personal items of Lena scattered. At the time of assessing the disappearance level, police classified the case as medium risk progressing quickly to high risk, due to 3 factors. 1. The victim left the last known location without taking her phone or car. 2. The indoor scene showed no indication of voluntary departure. 3. The no-contact time had exceeded 12 hours, surpassing the safe threshold for delaying response. The lead investigator's report determined this was not a case of an adult leaving home willingly, but a disappearance under unusual conditions requiring immediate expanded checks that same afternoon. In a quick briefing at the scene in the early afternoon of October 4th, the investigation team conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Lena Mercer's disappearance situation based on 4 standard possibilities: voluntary departure, accident, forced departure, or becoming a victim of a criminal act at her residence. The voluntary departure case was quickly deemed the least likely, as Lena left behind her phone, wallet, bank cards, and car, items she always took even for a few minutes out. No signs of packing or any indication of planned departure, as personal items, clothing, and work equipment remained full and in their usual places. The second possibility, an accident near the home, was considered based on the surrounding terrain. The backyard connected to light woods, but the ground showed no skid marks, no fresh footprints, and no items of Lena's dropped within visible range. The car remained parked at home, proving she did not leave the area by vehicle. The possibility of an indoor accident was initially ruled out due to no signs of fall, blood, or broken items. The forced departure scenario was analyzed longer. The main door not forced, windows locked from inside, no signs of struggle. However, the team noted this possibility could not be excluded because Lena might have opened the door for an acquaintance or had interaction before disappearing. Yet, if conflict occurred, the scene was too clean. Items not displaced, furniture in place, which reduced the likelihood of violence indoors. The final possibility, the victim encountering crime at the last scene location, could not be conclusively assessed due to insufficient data to support or refute. However, three factors lean toward abnormality: phone left in an easily accessible spot near the door, full glass of water unused, and bed showing no sleep signs. This chain indicated Lena abruptly stopped normal activities right after entering the home. The investigation team concluded that the likelihood of Lena actively leaving the home under normal conditions was extremely low. Scene conditions pointed to the interruption occurring between 9:15 and 10:06 p.m., the time of the phone's last ping. That was considered the most critical time window. After ruling out the two main possibilities, the team shifted to analyzing the possibility of an outdoor accident without transportation. Lena, walking out after 10 p.m., without her autumn coat, phone, and wallet, was deemed inconsistent with her typical behavior. Thus, the chance of an incident in the yard or along the wood's edge was considered. But currently, no physical traces supported it. Due to lack of evidence for either accident or voluntary departure, the investigation team shifted focus to the hypothesis of external influence, possibly coercion, or unexpected contact causing Lena to leave the safe space. With the high level of abnormality and the victim out of contact for over 14 hours, the commander decided to launch a wide-area search within 3 miles around the Mercer home. Trails leading into the woods, open clearings, dry creeks, and nearby residential areas were divided for search teams by specific zones. The K-9 unit was deployed that afternoon to track scent from the back door to the woods boundary to determine if Lena had left the house on foot. Concurrently, the mapping team opened terrain analysis layers, marking high-risk locations like rock crevices, slippery slopes, dark woods, and abandoned lots within 1 mile of the Mercer home. Patrol units were ordered to sweep each marked area and knock on nearby homes to gather information on movements or unusual sounds in the 9:30 to 11 p.m. window the previous night. The scale of deployment was deemed necessary because scene data did not indicate a specific direction of movement, preventing the team from ruling out any risk possibility. By late afternoon on October 4th, the official search plan was activated. Augusta County SAR forces, coordinating with the Virginia Search and Rescue Federation, divided into 3 groups, each responsible for a sector within a 3-mile radius around the Mercer home, an area including connected wooded sections, part of trails leading into the Shenandoah Range, and open fields interspersed with sparse residential areas. Based on the time window from 9:15 to 10:06 p.m., the previous night, the SR commander required prioritizing routes a pedestrian could cover in under 1 hour, thus creating a temporary map with 6 trails, 3 side paths to secondary roads, and 2 low areas at risk for slipping. The K-9 unit was deployed to the Mercer home's back door, where Lena's scent was most likely still present. The first tracking dog picked up a faint but steady scent, then began moving toward the low woods northwest. However, near the trail intersection at the wood's edge, the scent signal was interrupted, not strong enough to determine the next direction. This led the K-9 team leader to assess that either Lena did not go deep into the woods or the scent had dispersed due to night dew and thick decaying leaves. The SR teams began sweeping in a grid search pattern, dividing into terrain grids. Group 1 approached the Ridge Loop Trail, with rocky but observable terrain. Group 2 scanned the creek beds and muddy areas. Group 3 checked the sparsely populated areas scattered along Pilot Hill Road. In the first 3 hours, no direct evidence related to Lena was found. No coat, no shoes, no personal items, no torn fabric or jewelry. The search teams noted footprints, but due to thick leaf cover, high humidity, and animal activity, no prints were clear enough to classify. The northern woods had a few lightly disturbed soil spots from deer, noted but quickly ruled out. Cesar also checked tree hollows, thick bushes, and steep terrain areas, but recorded no signs of fall or collision. After the first group completed 80% of their assigned area without valuable information, the commander began considering that Lena did not walk out on her own or left in a direction different from natural trails. The terrain map was expanded with detailed layers from the county's GIS system, including elevation, tree density, unregistered access paths, and open lots not on civilian maps. In particular, 2 areas were marked red for thorough scanning: an abandoned logging yard nearly 2 miles from the Mercer home, and a 3-trail intersection where a lost person incident occurred in 2010. The mapping team also added simulations of adult movement speed in low light and rough terrain to determine the maximum distance Lena could travel if still alert from entering the home to the last phone signal. The simulation results showed the 3-mile radius was appropriate for the initial phase, but needed to prioritize populated areas over deep woods. Meanwhile, Cesar teams continuously updated the command post: no signs of fire, no abandoned items, no calls for help or unusual sounds from the woods. Even residential cameras along Pilot Hill Road recorded no people or movement in the suspected time frame, making the search direction hard to pinpoint. As darkness fell quickly, Cesar had to halt visual search and mark incomplete areas for continuation the next morning. All position data, trails, and sweep progress were entered into the main search map, forming the basis for the next expanded plan. On the morning of October 5th, when the SARE team returned to the scene to continue the remaining portion of the unfinished search grid, better lighting conditions made observing the ground much more effective than the previous evening. Around 8:42 a.m., Search Team 2, responsible for the area of the trail crossing northwest of Pilot Hill Road, discovered the first item potentially related to Lena: a thin black elastic hair tie, still fairly new, lodged between 2 layers of leaf litter right at the edge of the side trail. The location was approximately 1.4 miles from the Mercer home as the crow flies, and about 1.8 miles if walking through the woods. The hair tie was not soiled with dirt, showed no signs of decay, and had no indication of being exposed to the elements for long, leading the SARE team leader to mark it as potentially relevant rather than just random litter. The forensics team was called in, using gloves and tweezers to collect the item while photographing the discovery site from all angles. Impressions on the leaf surface suggested the hair tie may have fallen within the last 24 hours, but due to heavy overnight dew, an exact time frame could not be determined. This area was not a main trail. It saw little traffic and was not regularly used by locals, making the presence of such a small personal item even more noteworthy. While the forensics team finished collecting the hair tie, the SR group continued expanding the search within a 50-meter radius of the discovery point. Around 9:27 a.m., another member reported to Command Center that he had spotted a small piece of dark gray fabric caught on a blackberry branch approximately 70 meters in a straight line from the hair tie location. Upon closer inspection, the fabric measured about 1.5x 2.5 centimeters, still retained slight elasticity to the touch, and resembled synthetic fiber commonly used in jackets or thin sweater sleeves. The forensic investigator conducted a preliminary scene examination. The fabric was frayed on 2 edges, showing signs of tearing from friction rather than being cut with a tool. More importantly, the color was relatively consistent with the description of the gray jacket Lena often wore on late work days. The fabric piece was collected following standard procedure, along with surrounding soil and leaf samples. The discovery area was precisely GPS located to the meter and directly entered into the shared search map. With the 2 items found in close proximity, the investigation team began reviewing the previous day's data to assess whether this side trail had been included in the initial movement hypotheses. Topographic maps showed this area led away from the usual routes locals used. It had no clear exit, no signage, and had previously been described by the Mercer family as not safe for walking alone at night. Consequently, the presence of Lena's items in this location did not align with voluntary late-night walking or exercise behavior. The SR commander requested determining a reasonable radius if Lena had moved under low-light conditions without preparation. Simulations indicated that if she followed this side path for 15-20 minutes, starting from around 10:06 p.m., she could reach the hair tie discovery area, but there would need to be a reason for leaving the house in that direction without taking a warm jacket or phone. Investigators began questioning the possibility that Lena was led away, coerced into moving, or driven nearby, and then walked a short distance. To verify this possibility, the forensics team photographed the entire ground surface along 100 meters in each direction from the two discovery points. However, thick leaf cover and light overnight rain made finding footprints nearly impossible. Still not ruling out random coincidence, the investigation team requested full analysis of the fabric and hair tie samples for comparison with personal items from the Mercer home that same day. Concurrent with evidence preservation, the SR commander decided to expand the search radius an additional 2 miles northwest and southwest, creating a total 5-mile radius from the Mercer home. The primary reasons were two factors: 1, the evidence appearing in a single directional pattern away from the house; 2, the terrain featuring many interconnected small trails, forming a network that could allow a victim or abductor to move unnoticed. The mapping team updated GPS data from the two items, incorporating it into the GIS analysis layer to identify points with similar terrain characteristics: dense leaf forest, low slope, minimal ambient light from homes, and trails wide enough for one person to move without significant noise. From the analysis results, 3 areas were prioritized for expanded search: 1, the trail section connecting to Old Timber Cut, an abandoned lot, 1.7 miles away; 2, the area along the underground stream, leading down to a small valley with typically weak water flow; 3, the dense southern land near Ridge Loop, where several depressions existed that passers-by might not notice in the dark. The SR teams continued deploying to the new sectors, starting from noon until late afternoon, hoping the newly found evidence would lead them to Lena's primary direction of movement. Immediately after the 2 outdoor items were discovered, the investigation team returned to reviewing Evan Mercer's statements to cross-reference them with the new search data. During the afternoon session on October 5th, Evan was invited to the sheriff's office to provide more detail about the timeline of the evening of October 3rd, particularly the periods he had described vaguely in the initial home interview. Evan stated that after working at his office in Fishersville, he left around 6 p.m. and arrived at his apartment in Verona around 6:20 p.m. There, he said, he had a simple dinner, then prepared documents for the next morning's meeting, and did not leave the apartment until receiving his father's call on the morning of October 4th. Evan insisted he did not visit Lena's house that evening and had no further contact with his sister after the 8:17 p.m. message. Investigators asked Evan to describe in detail the timing of each activity, including computer and phone use and bedtime. Evan said he worked on his laptop from about 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., then watched part of a program and went to bed at 11 p.m. He denied any movement outside the apartment between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. the next day. After recording the statement, the investigation team compared Evan's stated timeline with objective data collected from the area around the Mercer home. This was especially critical given the outdoor evidence appearing on the Northwest Trail system, a direction Evan had never mentioned. First, police analyzed footage from 3 neighboring homes on Pilot Hill Road. Although the area lacked public cameras, residents had private security systems. The Halden home camera, opposite the Mercer residence, captured headlight glare from a vehicle passing at 9:41 p.m., heading away from town. The image was blurry, unable to identify license plate or make, but the light size and height suggested it was likely an SUV or crossover, consistent with both Lena's Subaru headlight height and Evan's vehicle. However, the difference lay in the direction the vehicle was traveling opposite the approach to the Mercer home. The investigation team considered it might belong to another resident, but did not rule out relevance to the disappearance. A second camera at the Patel home half a mile away recorded headlight reflection on the road at 10:02 p.m. But the angle was not wide enough to capture the vehicle body. This was noteworthy because it closely coincided with Lena's final phone ping. When compared to the initial statement that no one left the Mercer home after 9:15, the investigation team flagged this camera data for further verification. Next, police reviewed lighting from neighboring homes. Mrs. Halden reported the Mercer yard light stayed on until 10 p.m., then went off. This slightly contradicted the assumption Lena was still inside at that time, as interior lights were not typically automated unless programmed. The Mercer family confirmed the yard light had no timer. The possibility that someone manually turned it off was noted for consideration. Investigators added this question to the list for Evan to address, though no evidence yet implicated him. After completing image data analysis, the team examined a minor inconsistency in Evan's statements in the first interview. He said he only worked and watched TV that evening, but in the second session, Evan stated he worked on documents past 10 p.m. and went straight to sleep afterward, omitting mention of watching TV. This small change was flagged, but lacked significant weight. Police also checked streetlight signals on Pilot Hill Road, but no data was retained as the system was old and lacked automatic recording. From cross-referencing Evan's timeline with observed data, the investigation team noted 3 initial anomalies. 1. No objective evidence confirmed Evan's continuous presence at his Verona apartment that evening. 2. Vehicle headlights appeared at 2 times overlapping the period Lena was believed still inside, with no residents confirming passage at those exact times. 3. Evan's statements contained minor discrepancies between the 2 retellings, though not yet substantial contradictions. When the investigation team compiled these factors on the overall analysis board, they concluded Evan's timeline required independent verification through phone records, computer data, and farther traffic cameras beyond Pilot Hill Road. Simultaneously, the team noted that the outdoor evidence inadvertently opened a new comparison angle. If Lena moved or was led to the evidence discovery area, it meant her path did not originate from routine routes. In the absence of direct witnesses, comparing Evan's statements to peripheral data became the central task to determine the sequence of Lena's disappearance and whether a third party was involved. On the morning of October 6th, as SAR teams continued expanding the outdoor search, the forensics team returned to the Mercer home for a second detailed examination, this time focusing on collecting trace evidence and electronic device data to cross-reference with hypotheses formed from Evan's statements and the outdoor evidence. First, the forensics team identified key areas based on Lena's typical movement patterns: the front door, the living room table where her document bag was left, the sofa area, living room rug, kitchen, and stairs to the second floor. The goal was to find signs of unusual interruption, no matter how minor, between the time Lena entered the home and complete loss of contact. The forensics team began with samples from the living room rug, as it was the most likely place the victim stood or set items down before disappearing. The rug had thick pile, light gray color, and readily retained trace material. Technicians used alternate light sources and filters to search for any fluid traces or drag marks, but found no obvious signs visible to the naked eye. However, several small darker spots, difficult to distinguish unaided, were marked and swabbed for later biological analysis. They also used adhesive rollers to collect foreign fibers, hair, dust, or torn fabric. Most were normal household debris, but one small brown fiber, similar in color to the outdoor fabric piece, was collected separately for comparison. After completing the rug, the forensics team moved to the living room sofa. This was where Lena typically sat to work when returning late and was near where her phone was found. The sofa showed no new indentations, indicating recent sitting, but that was not conclusive, since Lena might have stood during the brief period before disappearing. However, the team discovered a light scratch on the right armrest, newer than surrounding wear marks. The scratch measured 1.6 centimeters long, horizontal, and did not penetrate deeply into the fabric. Under alternate light, there was no fluid reaction, but additional fibers from the area were collected to compare color, weave, and potential displacement from external contact. On the seat cushion, a dark hair approximately 7 centimeters long was recovered, but the team noted it was likely Lena's based on family description. Next, the forensics team collected logs and examined electronic devices in the home. They started with the modem and router near the TV stand to determine the last Wi-Fi activity time. The router recorded normal activity until 9:58 p.m. on October 3rd, with no further internal network access until 7 a.m. the next day when Lena's parents entered. Investigators flagged 9:58 p.m. as significant since it closely aligned with Lena's final phone ping at 10:06 p.m. No unknown devices connected to the Wi-Fi during that window. The tech team also retrieved logs from the smart light controller installed by the family for some rooms, showing the living room light turned on at 9:17 p.m., with no subsequent manual off command. The front yard light turned off at 10 p.m., matching neighbor Halden's statement, but logs confirmed the action was manual rather than timed. This was noted because Lena rarely turned off the yard light before bed, and the family confirmed no automated schedule. To further analyze possibilities, the forensics team seized Lena's personal laptop, left on the table beside the sofa, still in its bag and showing no signs of use after she arrived home. The computer was powered off but charged, with no pry marks or impact damage. They also seized Lena's phone, left on the small table near the window. The device had no cracks, over 50% battery, and all notifications since the previous evening remained unread. Additionally, the investigation noted the phone charger was plugged in, but not connected to the phone, suggesting Lena had no intention of leaving for long or charging immediately. After completing device collection, the forensics team compiled a scene status report. The entire house showed no signs of struggle, no forced windows, no blood on surfaces, and no indications of physical confrontation. However, 3 points were flagged as anomalous. 1, the phone left behind, while the car keys were not found in the house. 2, router activity ceasing close to the final phone ping time. 3, manual yard light shutdown inconsistent with Lena's habits. The report concluded the indoor scene provided no direct evidence of forced action, but revealed a sudden interruption in Lena's routine shortly after entering the home. This aligned with the hypothesized disappearance window of 9:30–10:06 p.m., a time frame too brief for a voluntary departure by an adult while leaving behind all essential items. Immediately after seizing Lena's laptop and phone, along with the device logs from the house, the investigation team shifted to analyzing data from 3 mobile cell towers near Pilot Hill Road to reconstruct signal activity within the time frame from 8 p.m. to midnight on October 3rd. The first point confirmed was Lena's phone's final ping at 10:06 p.m., connecting to the cell tower in the southeast area of Mount Solon. The data showed this signal was stable, with no indication of movement beyond 200–250 meters from the Mercer home, meaning the phone remained within close range of the building at that time. About 15 minutes before the final ping, the phone recorded a slight fluctuation in signal strength, which commonly occurs when a device is placed on a soft surface or partially obstructed, suggesting that the phone may have been set down on a table or fallen out of a pocket while Lena was moving around inside the house. After 10:06 p.m., there was no further data, indicating the phone was turned off, lost power, or completely shielded. The fact that Lena did not leave the house with her phone is a key point because this data rules out scenarios where the victim voluntarily went far away or was led away while carrying the device. Parallel to the analysis of Lena's data, the investigation team examined cell tower data related to Evan Mercer to check the consistency of the statement he provided. Evan stated that he was home all evening, not leaving his apartment in Verona from 7 p.m. until the next morning. However, carrier data showed Evan's phone connecting continuously to the cell tower south of Verona from 7 p.m. to 9:31 p.m., consistent with his initial statement, but from 9:31 to 10:12 p.m., the period overlapping with when Lena lost contact. Evan's device alternately connected to two different towers, one in Fishersville and one in central Verona, about 1.1 to 1.4 miles from his apartment. It is difficult for a stationary device to switch between two cell towers with small coverage radii like that unless it is moving. This led the investigation team to flag the time period from 9:31–10:12 p.m. as anomalous, since Evan had provided no explanation for the signal changes. Upon closer analysis, the Fishersville Tower only covers part of Interstate 81 and a section of Route 250, both routes that someone traveling from Verona to Pilot Hill Road could pass through. However, the tower's connection range is wide enough that it cannot definitively conclude Evan left his apartment or was near a vehicle. The analysis team continued by simulating travel speeds. If Evan left his apartment at 9:31 p.m. and drove on main roads, he could reach the Pilot Hill Road area in about 16–19 minutes, depending on traffic conditions. This would place him in the vicinity of the Mercer home right around the time Lena's phone sent its final ping. When combining the simulation with SAR data analysis, particularly the two outdoor pieces of evidence found more than 1 mile from the Mercer home, police began considering the possibility that the evidence discovery site could align with a route a vehicle leaving the Mercer home around 10 p.m. might take. Although there are no traffic cameras in the forested area, the cell tower data allowed them to narrow down 3 potential routes: the extension of Pilot Hill Road to Ridge Loop, Old Timber Cut, and the turnoff to the secondary trail leading into the northwest forest where the evidence was found. Of these, the second and third routes fall within the overlapping coverage of the Fishersville cell tower if a vehicle was moving slowly or stopped temporarily. Upon further cross-referencing, the investigation team noted that Evan's phone reconnected to the cell tower near his apartment at 10:12 p.m. with strong and stable signal strength, similar to a device stationary indoors or near an apartment window. The distance from the suspected point to Evan's apartment in Verona is about 11 to 13 miles, depending on the route. Assuming continuous travel, the return time would be around 15–18 minutes, matching the 10:12 p.m. timestamp recorded by the cell tower. Although it cannot be concluded as definitive proof that Evan traveled, the cell tower data presents a paradox that needs explanation for the phone signal to switch towers in that way. He would have had to leave the apartment or be in conditions causing abnormal signal reflection, an uncommon event in an open residential area with few high-rise buildings. Noting the coincidence between the cell tower data and the time Lena's signal was lost, the investigation team flagged suspicious point number 1, defined as the travel window on the evening of October 3rd, between approximately 9:35–10:12 p.m. where both devices showed anomalies. Suspicious point number 1 was described as the time period with potential for an event impacting the disappearance, based on 3 factors. 1. Lena's final ping occurring within this window. 2. Evan's signal becoming unstable during the same window. 3. Simulated travel speeds, matching the distance between Evan's apartment and the area where evidence was found. The analysis team concluded that further expansion of cell data checks within a larger radius and extraction of detailed connection history for Evan was needed to determine if repeated movement patterns appeared, thereby more accurately assessing the role of the 9:31–10:12 p.m. period in the overall sequence of Lena's disappearance. When the cell tower data revealed fluctuations inconsistent with Evan's statement, the investigation team decided to move to examining his vehicle as a necessary step to verify potential movement during the 9:31–10:12 p.m. timeframe. On the afternoon of October 7th, Evan agreed to bring his dark blue Ford Escape SUV to the inspection lot at the sheriff's office in Verona as requested. The vehicle examination was conducted following standard forensic procedures, starting with the exterior surfaces, then the tires, undercarriage, trunk, and interior cabin. The goal was to collect samples of soil, dust, fibers, or any traces that might relate to the area where Lena's evidence was found or nearby forested routes. The forensic team began by documenting the overall vehicle condition. The exterior was unusually clean, especially in areas prone to dirt accumulation like wheel wells, fenders, and door sills. Although the surface was generally clean, under angled lighting, dried water streaks in a splatter pattern were visible, suggesting the vehicle had been recently washed, but not with a professional car wash, more like a quick hose down. When asked about washing the vehicle, Evan replied that 2 days prior he had used the hose at his apartment complex to clean off dust. Although this was not considered evidence, it heightened the investigation team's interest in potential traces remaining in hard-to-clean areas. The forensic team moved to examining the tires. The front right tire had a thin layer of dried mud stuck in the tread grooves, dark brown in color mixed with small plant debris. This was notable because soil in the Pilot Hill Road area is typically lighter in color, whereas the soil sample found near the hair tie location had a similar dark brown shade. A soil sample was collected using a tread scraping tool and sealed in a vial. The 2 rear tires were significantly cleaner, indicating the mud primarily adhered to the front tire, consistent with a vehicle driving on soft terrain and making a quick turnaround. Continuing to the undercarriage, the technician identified compressed decayed leaves wedged into the edge of the right side skid plate. The leaves were dry but not completely fragmented, indicating they had not been under the vehicle for too long. This leaf sample was collected along with adjacent dust for pollen and plant fiber analysis. When beginning the trunk inspection, the forensic team noted an unusual detail. The lower edge of the trunk had a scratch about 3 cm long, with fresh edges showing bright metal, not oxidized. Evan explained that he accidentally scraped the trunk against the garage edge while storing tools the day before. The investigation team noted the explanation, but still photographed the scratch from multiple angles for analysis. Inside the trunk, the carpet lining had no large stains, but in the rear right corner, there were 2 small dark gray fabric fibers, with a weave texture similar to the fabric fragment recovered from the forest. These fibers were very small, difficult to see without specialized lighting. The forensic team used tweezers to collect each fiber into separate evidence containers. Notably, the 2 fibers were about 12 centimeters apart, lying on a relatively clean flat surface, suggesting they adhered to the vehicle through direct contact with similar material. The interior cabin was examined next. On the passenger side floor mat, there was fine dark brown powdery soil, different from the typical road dust seen on paved roads in Verona. This dust was collected via dry sweep sampling and sealed. The rear seats had no new scratches, but on the back of the left rear seat, there was a slight abrasion, a horizontal trail 1.2 centimeters long, similar to the type caused by a hard object rubbing across the surface. The forensic team photographed it and collected fabric fibers from the area for comparison with the Mercer home sofa material and forest fabric fragments. While checking the center console, the technician noticed recent plug marks in the USB port, but this was a common detail and not flagged as anomalous. The vehicle's glove compartment contained a few papers with no suspicious items. Upon completing sample collection, all evidence was logged and coded, including soil sample from front tire tread, interior dust sample, leaf sample from undercarriage, 2 fabric fibers from trunk, rear seat fiber sample, and scene photos of the vehicle with the fresh scratch. The forensic team compiled a list of samples for forensic analysis, including DNA analysis. If skin cells were present, soil analysis to compare minerals and pollen with the forest where evidence was found, and microfiber analysis to match material with Lena's torn fabric fragment. The samples were registered for priority shipment to the Virginia State Lab in Richmond, with the goal of preliminary results within 1 week. At the end of the vehicle examination, the investigation team noted an overall report. Evan's vehicle was unusually clean given weather conditions. Had mud concentrated only on the front tire, had a fresh trunk scratch, and had microfiber and soil with characteristics similar to the area where Lena's evidence was found. All these details were not sufficient to conclude criminal activity, but enough to elevate the level of suspicion regarding Evans' statement for the night of October 3rd, especially when coinciding with cell tower data indicating possible movement during the critical time frame. While awaiting results from the analysis of samples from Evans' vehicle, the investigation team focused on strengthening peripheral data by collecting statements from neighbors and individuals present in the Pilot Hill Road area on the evening of October 3rd. The goal was to determine if anyone heard unusual noises, observed strange movements, or saw Lena leave the house before disappearing. The canvass began with Mrs. Ruth Halden's home, the last person to see Lena entering the house at around 9:15 p.m. Mrs. Halden stated that about an hour later, around 10:10 p.m., she heard a slamming sound coming from the direction of the Mercer home, like a car door closing hard. According to her description, the noise was not followed by an engine starting sound, but she admitted she had turned off the TV, so she might have missed smaller sounds. She did not see anyone moving on the Mercer driveway and did not hear voices or arguing. When asked in detail about the timing, she confirmed the noise occurred right after the Mercer front yard light turned off, a detail matching the device log record. About 300 meters from the Halden home, the Peterson couple stated they heard a strange noise between 9:40 and 9:45 p.m., described as footsteps or something being dragged across a wooden surface while Mr. Peterson was clearing the outdoor table. However, he was unsure of the direction and admitted it could have been wildlife since deer often pass through the area. Although not considered direct evidence, the investigation team logged it because the timing fell within the suspicious window of 9:30, 10:06 p.m. The third neighbors, the Patel family, have a camera facing the main road. They did not hear noises, but Mrs. Patel remembered that around 10 p.m., she looked out the window and saw the Mercer living room light still on, but the yard light off. When asked if she saw silhouettes or movement inside the house, she replied no, only light reflecting through the windows. The investigation team flagged this detail because it reinforces the manual yard light shutdown timestamp. Another resident, Mr. Leroy Simmons, living nearly half a mile south of the Mercer home, stated that around 10:20 p.m., he heard a vehicle engine running slowly, then suddenly accelerating. He described the sound as not like a regular car driving steadily, more like a vehicle on uneven dirt before reaching pavement. However, due to the house angle and tree lines blocking the view, he did not see the vehicle. The investigation team noted that the described sound could correspond to the terrain of the secondary trail where evidence was found, though it could not be confirmed. Also during statement collection, investigators asked all neighbors if anyone saw Lena leave the house. The results were completely consistent. No one saw her leave by vehicle or on foot in any time frame after 9:15 p.m. There were no car door lights, no engine starting sounds, no movement on the driveway. This reinforces the conclusion that if Lena left the house, it occurred under non-voluntary conditions or via the back door, where neighbor visibility is limited. When asked about strangers appearing in the area in the prior week, most neighbors said they saw no one unusual, except for one instance about 3 days before the disappearance when Mr. Peterson saw a dark-colored SUV driving slowly along Pilot Hill Road as if looking for an address. He did not remember the license plate and could not clearly describe the model. The investigation team noted the information but could not yet link it to any other event. Regarding the Mercer home light schedule, neighbors all said Lena usually left the yard light on until late, especially when working late. The light turning off around 10 p.m. was considered unusual, and no one reported seeing Lena in the yard or on the porch at that time. No residents reported seeing silhouettes near the back door. Another witness, Miss Maria Lopez, living nearly 400 meters away, recalled that when taking her dog out around 10:30 p.m., her dog barked toward the northwest forest, which it rarely does. She did not hear anything else and brought the dog inside shortly after. The team flagged the timestamp because it aligns with the direction where evidence was found, but could not determine if it was a reaction to a person or animal. At the end of the statement collection day, the investigation team compiled all data into an operational analysis table in which 3 clusters of details stood out as anomalous. A sound like a car door slamming coinciding with Lena's final ping time, an illogical light schedule change, and the lack of any witness seeing her leave, despite all her belongings remaining inside. Although not sufficient to form direct evidence, these factors, when combined with cell tower data and outdoor evidence, indicate that the disruption in Lena's routine occurred suddenly, silently, and without voluntary characteristics. The next day, the investigation team moved on to the next critical step, constructing the first timeline of the disappearance, integrating all available data, including outdoor physical evidence, neighbor statements, cell tower analysis results, the indoor crime scene, and the results from examining Evans' vehicle. The goal was to reconstruct the most logical sequence of events within the time frame from when Lena left the office until the family discovered she was missing, categorizing the information into 3 groups: confirmed data, highly probable data, and data requiring further verification through independent sources. In the confirmed data group, the investigation team determined Lena arrived home at approximately 9:15 p.m. Her phone last pinged at 10:06 p.m. The front porch light was manually turned off around that time. There were no signs she left the house with her phone or car. The outdoor physical evidence was located more than 1 mile away, in a northwest direction. No one saw Lena leave the house, and Evans' car had soil traces and microfibers that closely matched the area where the evidence was found. In the highly probable data group, the investigation team included a sound similar to a car door slamming at around 10:10 p.m. Dragging or footsteps from the wooded area between approximately 9:45 p.m. an engine revving sound at around 10:20 p.m. Evans' cell tower changing between 9:31, 10:12 p.m. and the indoor scene showing no signs of activity after 9:17 p.m. In the data needing verification group, they noted the reason the porch light was turned off, the reason Lena's phone was not used after she got home, Evans' explanation for washing his car, and whether the soil sample in the car truly matched the area where the evidence was found. After categorizing the data, the investigation team proceeded to build a timeline from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. In the 9:15, 10:06 p.m. period, they identified an interruption of activity window based on 3 factors: Lena not using her phone, not drinking from her glass of water, and not sitting on the bed. This indicated that the event leading to the disappearance occurred before 10:06 p.m. However, the outdoor evidence and subsequent sounds forced them to extend the timeline beyond 10 p.m. Based on the sounds neighbors heard, the investigation team believed it was likely that Lena was removed from the house shortly after the final ping. The fact that the phone did not leave the house was a key factor, as it indicated that if there was movement, Lena did not take the device with her. Meanwhile, Evans' cell tower changed during the same time frame, placing him in the suspect window of 9:31, 10:12 p.m., overlapping with the time of unusual sounds around the Mercer home. From this data chain, the investigation team constructed a preliminary possible timeline. After entering the house at 9:15, Lena performed no routine activities. Around 9:30, 9:45, an interrupting event occurred, leading to the porch light being turned off at 10 o'clock. Between 10 o'clock, 10:10, the sounds neighbors heard could have been a car door opening or closing. Around 10:20, an engine sound moved away from the area. The investigation team raised the question, if Lena was removed from the house, why was there no sign of a struggle? This led to the hypothesis branch that the event happened quickly and without significant noise, or that the victim was unable to resist. To examine the post-10:00 p.m. markers, the investigation team extended the timeline to 4 a.m. When reviewing cell tower data from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. across the entire area, they discovered a series of weak pings from an unidentified device appearing at the northern cell tower between approximately 1:30–1:47 a.m., then shifting to the eastern tower between 2:10–2:25 a.m. before disappearing. This data was not directly linked to Lena or Evan, but the locations were near the forest road leading to the evidence area, prompting the investigation team to mark 1:34 a.m. as a suspect activity window, not due to evidence of a crime, but because many missing persons cases in forested terrain involve post-event handling during late hours when traffic is low. The investigators also noted that if the primary event occurred around 9:30–10:10 p.m., then the 1:34 a.m. period could relate to secondary movement, a point not yet confirmable, but sufficient to include in the analytical timeline. Upon completing version 1.0, the investigation team assessed the current timeline lacks direct digital evidence from Lena's personal devices, lacks data from long-range recording devices, and requires further forensic analysis of the laptop, phone, and router to precisely determine in-home activity and detect signs of unauthorized access. They proposed deeper digital forensics to 1. Check application logs, emails, and unsent drafts. 2. Recover data deleted near the time of disappearance. 3. Analyze network activity from the laptop and home IoT devices. 4. Determine if there were attempts to unlock or interact with Lena's devices just before 10:06 p.m. The investigation team concluded that timeline version 1.0 provides a relatively clear framework of events before and immediately after the disappearance, but lacks digital data to explain the gaps, particularly the 1:34 a.m. window, which stands out due to its geographic coincidence with the evidence discovery area. This makes digital forensics the focus for the next investigation phase. Immediately after completing timeline version 1.0, the investigation team shifted to the digital forensics phase to gather objective data from Lena's computer and devices to fill gaps unexplained by statements or outdoor evidence. The digital unit of the sheriff's office coordinated with the Virginia State Lab to conduct standard forensic procedures, creating hard drive images, verifying checksums to ensure integrity, then performing layered data analysis, starting with emails, system activity logs, and system files. During the email inbox scan, technicians discovered an unsent email draft created at 8:59 p.m. on October 3rd, about 15 minutes before Lena arrived home. The draft content was short, just a few incomplete lines, but metadata showed it was reopened at 9:14 p.m., right when Lena entered the house and was still online. After 9:14, the file was not further edited, and there were no autosaves between 9:15 and 10:06 p.m. This was clear evidence that Lena did not use the computer after setting down her bag, aligning with the conclusion that the interruption occurred early. The technical team continued extracting laptop activity logs. Registry data showed the device was powered on in the morning of October 3rd, active throughout the day at the office, but not powered back on at home. However, system logs recorded an activity ping at 9:16 p.m., most likely when Lena opened her bag and lightly bumped the external power button, causing a background response without fully booting. After 9:16, there were no signs of mouse movement, keyboard input, or any user interaction. This strongly supported the hypothesis that Lena had no time to interact with the device after entering the house. Next, technicians examined Wi-Fi history and network connection logs. The home router recorded Lena's laptop connecting to Wi-Fi at 9:17 p.m., but no network access afterward, no emails sent, no websites opened, no app syncing. The Wi-Fi connection entered idle state from 9:19 p.m. until the router lost signal at 7 a.m. the next morning when Lena's parents entered. The complete lack of network activity from 9:20 to 10:06 further reinforced the hypothesis that Lena performed no actions during the presumed disappearance window. The next critical step was recovering deleted video files from Lena's computer. Forensic scanning detected a small-capacity video deleted 3 days before October 3rd, located in the temporary folder of editing software Lena used for work. The recovered video was only 11 minutes long, unrelated directly to the disappearance, but metadata showed Lena opened the editing file at 5:12 p.m. on October 3rd, at the office. No video files were deleted or created on the evening of the incident, meaning the laptop was not used after arriving home. However, deeper cache scanning revealed a corrupted thumbnail file created at 9:16 p.m., suggesting Lena may have opened her bag or touched the device, prompting the system to attempt regenerating thumbnails for recent files. The fact that the system only created a thumbnail at that moment, and no others, also aligned with the hypothesis that the laptop was not used after 9:16 p.m. Technicians continued analyzing operating system logs for signs of unauthorized access or connected foreign devices. All USB records showed no external devices connected after 4 p.m. that day. Security logs showed no failed password entries, no unusual access, or unlock attempts during the incident time. This ruled out the possibility of someone using the laptop to conceal information in the 9:15–10:06 p.m. window. Meanwhile, the technical team analyzed AutoNote applications, schedule history, and most recently opened documents. All indicated Lena worked continuously on October 3rd, but opened no new documents upon arriving home. One notable detail flagged, keyboard usage charts from the prior 2 weeks showed Lena habitually opened her laptop for 20 to 40 minutes upon returning home. Especially on late workdays, this behavior was completely absent on the evening of October 3rd. This anomaly indicated her routine was interrupted immediately after entering the house, matching both router logs and phone ping data. Finally, the technical team constructed a digital behavior chart for Lena based on computer, phone, and network usage history over the 30 days prior to the disappearance. The chart revealed 3 prominent behavior patterns. 1. Lena typically checked email upon arriving home. 2. She rarely let her phone go unused for more than 15 minutes, except when sleeping. And 3. She usually left the porch light on throughout the evening if returning late. On the evening of October 3rd, all 3 behaviors vanished simultaneously. She did not check email, did not move her phone, and did not leave the porch light on late. The simultaneous absence of these consistent behaviors was evaluated by the technical team as clearly abnormal, suggesting Lena either could not or did not have time to perform her familiar routines. Through this initial digital forensics analysis, the investigation team concluded that Lena's laptop and phone were not used after she entered the house, there was no unauthorized access, and no network activity occurred in the window leading to the disappearance. This reinforced the assessment that the interrupting event happened suddenly, leaving Lena no time to interact with any devices, a key factor in narrowing the investigative time window further. After completing the digital forensics phase and confirming that Lena did not use any devices after returning home, the investigation team shifted to analyzing financial records to determine if there were any unusual transactions related to the disappearance time, particularly in the 1:34 a.m. window, flagged as notable in Timeline version 1.0. The first abnormality in bank data appeared in Evan Mercer's personal account. Although he stated that on the evening of October 3rd, he slept at his Verona apartment from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., transaction history showed a $200 cash withdrawal at an ATM at a gas station en route 250 at 4:12 a.m. on October 4th. This ATM was approximately 2.6 miles from Evan's apartment, located directly on a route that could quickly connect to Pilot Hill Road or back to Verona. When initially questioned, Evan explained that he had insomnia and went for a short drive to feel better, conveniently withdrawing cash for weekend purchases. The investigation team noted the statement, but this detail contradicted his prior claim that he did not leave the apartment from 11 p.m. until the next morning. This made the 4:12 a.m. transaction a point requiring deeper analysis. Continuing to review other debit card transactions in Evan's account, investigators discovered that at noon on October 4th, just hours after the family reported Lena missing, Evan purchased several car cleaning items at a convenience store in Fishersville, including interior wipes, strong stain remover solution, and 2 packs of odor-eliminating wipes. The total value was small, but the items matched materials commonly used to treat car seats and carpets. When asked about the reason for these purchases, Evan said it was a regular need because he liked keeping his car clean. However, cross-referencing with transaction history from the prior 2 months, the investigation team found that Evan rarely bought car cleaning products at convenience stores and typically used full-service car washes in Verona on weekends, purchasing self-treatment interior cleaning items on the day Lena was reported missing, while coinciding with his car showing signs of hasty washing when examined, was evaluated as abnormal. In addition to Evan's account, the investigation team reviewed Lena's financial accounts to check for signs of financial stress, large unusual transactions, or sudden transfers before the disappearance. However, Lena's bank records for the 90 days prior showed no suspicious transactions, regular bi-weekly paycheck deposits, on-time bill payments, no large outflows, and no credit card debt exceeding limits. This ruled out the possibility that Lena had motive to leave due to financial pressure or involvement in economic issues. The investigation team also checked shared financial history between Lena and Evan, but found no loans or interrelated transactions in the past year. After evaluating both data streams, focus shifted entirely to Evan's financial behavior. The 4:12 a.m. cash withdrawal was analyzed against common behavior patterns in missing persons cases. Most people leaving home in that time frame do so for emergencies, night shifts, or unusual events. In Evan's case, there was no work reason, no calls or messages prompting a 4 a.m. drive. If he simply had insomnia, as stated, driving over 2 miles to a gas station rather than walking around the apartment complex was deemed inconsistent with typical behavior. Another point was that the withdrawal time overlapped with the period, timeline version 1.0, identified as suspicious activity in the forested area, when cell towers recorded weak pings from an unidentified device near the evidence location. Although no direct link could be confirmed, the investigation team viewed this as a coincidence requiring further clarification. Beyond the cash withdrawal and car cleaning purchases, no other Evan transactions in the 48 hours post-disappearance were deemed suspicious. However, these small transactions held high investigative value, according to the financial analysis team, as they indicated changes in Evan's usual behavior chain. He rarely bought car cleaning items, rarely left home in the early morning hours, and had no history of cash withdrawals at unusual times like 4 a.m. The investigation team compiled all data and provided an initial assessment. There was no evidence of direct economic motive related to Lena's disappearance, no loans, asset disputes, or financial benefits between the two. However, Evan's financial behavior immediately before and after the disappearance showed notable abnormalities, driving out at 4 a.m., withdrawing cash at a location not on his usual route, and purchasing car cleaning items on the day of the missing report. These points did not prove criminal behavior, but were sufficient to classify Evan as a person of interest, requiring further in-depth scrutiny, especially as the financial data aligned with suspicions from cell data, outdoor evidence, and traces recovered from the vehicle. Immediately after the investigation team compiled Evan's financial data and noticed anomalies that matched key timelines in timeline version 1.0, the field commander decided to expand the search for the second time, focusing on areas with complex terrain, but potentially related to the assumed travel route from Pilot Hill Road out to the wider forested region. On October 8, SAR forces along with the Augusta County Mounted Unit and Drone Unit were deployed to priority points, starting from the intersections of Blue Ridge Parkway, a highland route stretching through many forests and valleys, with countless hidden trails. Cell tower data showed that if a vehicle moved from Pilot Hill Road during the 10:20 p.m. window or the 1:30-2:30 a.m. window, it could access several secondary branches of Blue Ridge Parkway within 15-20 minutes. Therefore, the SR team deployed to check each small roadside parking spot, main trail entrances, and areas commonly used by hikers. The mounted unit scanned along both sides of the road at low slope points, where a body or items could be discarded, but not easily spotted from a driver's view. Drones were used to scan from above, especially at points where the forest canopy created thick coverage, obscuring the ground. Throughout the first day of searching, no evidence or signs of soil disturbance related to Lena were found. Nevertheless, SAR noted several low-lying areas that could be dangerous for nighttime pedestrians, marked for rechecking with ground-penetrating equipment, but not suspicious enough to focus on there. After completing the northern section of Blue Ridge Parkway, the group continued to the southwestern segment, where the terrain was more complex, with many deep ravines and rocky ledges. Here, the investigation team discovered a narrow trail, not on common maps, leading down to a small clearing. However, detailed inspection showed no footprints, no fabric scraps, no jewelry or personal items. Observation of the leaf layer and decomposition level indicated the surface had no disturbances in the past few weeks. The lack of traces led the SAR team to conclude this area was unlikely connected to the disappearance. When Blue Ridge Parkway yielded no results, the search focus shifted to Ramsey's Draft Wilderness, a vast, pristine forest area located about 3 to 4 miles west of the evidence discovery route, with more rugged terrain, but still within vehicle travel radius. Ramsey's Draft was considered one of the points that could be exploited to hide evidence or a body due to dense tree coverage, numerous water ravines, and hard-to-trace trails. The investigation team divided the area into 3 subzones: stream zones, mountainside zones, and basin zones. Drones were deployed in a grid pattern to look for any unusual shapes on the ground. K9 teams were used to check segments with airflow, where decomposition odors, if present, would be easily detected. Over 2 days of sweeping Ramsey's Draft, SAR noted some animal tracks, natural land subsidence areas, and paths used by foresters, but no suspicious signs related to humans. No clothing, bags, fabric fibers, jewelry, or burial signs were found. Many initial suspicious points turned out to be just rock hollows or uprooted tree stumps. The search team also expanded to areas connecting Ramsey's Draft to segments of Shenandoah Mountain Trail, but still no results. The combination of thick canopy, heavy leaf fall, and uneven terrain made the chance of finding small evidence nearly zero, without specific guiding clues. When no strategy produced progress, the SAR commander organized an evaluation meeting. They commented that although the outdoor evidence near Pilot Hill Road proved Lena or her belongings had moved into the forest, there were no signs indicating the rest of the journey led deep into Blue Ridge Parkway or Ramsey's Draft. If the body was in the forest, it was either in an extremely inaccessible area or had never been brought to the searched regions. Weather conditions for the following week were forecasted to worsen, making ground sweeps risky and ineffective. K9 teams also faced limits because the entire area was saturated with strong natural scents. At the end of October 12th, after nearly a week of expanded searching but yielding no substantial evidence, the SAR commander announced a temporary halt to active search operations. This decision was based on 3 reasons: lack of new directional data, the level of manpower depletion, and terrain exceeding effective search capability without additional suspicious points. The search file shifted to standby status, awaiting new directives if information or evidence emerged that could narrow the scope. The investigation team noted that although the expanded search had covered a vast area from Pilot Hill Road to Blue Ridge Parkway and Ramsey's Draft Wilderness, there were no signs Lena had ever left the area near home voluntarily or on a long journey. The failure to find a body or characteristic traces left the victim's location determination at an impasse, forcing the investigation to shift focus to other data sources instead of continuing to expand searches in overly broad terrain. After the expanded search efforts in Blue Ridge Parkway and Ramsey's Draft Wilderness yielded no useful traces, the investigation team transferred the entire field report, preliminary analysis results, and suspicions surrounding Evans' statements to the Augusta County Prosecutor's Office for evaluation of prosecution potential. The prosecutor in charge of the file, after reviewing all data collected from October to December 2013, concluded that although there were many unusual details, such as Evan appearing near suspicious points during matching time periods, cell tower results not matching statements, outdoor evidence possibly related to Lena, and notable financial transactions at 4:12 a.m. All only formed a chain of speculative data, not weighty enough to constitute direct evidence. No body, no signs Lena left home under another's will, no witnesses seeing a scuffle or coercive act, and no forensic evidence proving a second person's presence in the crime space, the minimum conditions for the prosecution to bring criminal charges. Particularly, the absence of a body made the time-location mechanism crime model indeterminable. The inability to prove a crime had occurred meant the prosecution could not seek an arrest warrant, even for expanded questioning. The forensic technical room reported that soil samples from Evan's vehicle had not yielded matches with any areas in the search scope. Recovered video files from Lena's laptop showed no direct personal conflicts. Lena's unsent email drafts only expressed work fatigue, not mentioning family conflicts, and home device logs had no unusual activity beyond unexplainable time gaps. The prosecution assessed that forcing an arrest under current evidence-deficient conditions would risk the case collapsing entirely in the pretrial phase, causing long-term damage to future reinvestigation potential. Meanwhile, the Mercer family continued urging police to maintain investigative pressure, but the investigation team commander explained that the investigation had reached the limit of existing physical evidence. Although Evan remained in the suspect group, the law did not allow further progress without direct evidence or new circumstances. Into early 2014, Evan left Virginia, moving to Knoxville, Tennessee for new job reasons. His departure did not violate the law. He was not under surveillance, not on probation, and not considered a subject required to report movements. However, this relocation caused the investigation team to lose the ability to observe behavior or collect additional daily life information, significantly reducing chances for natural clues to emerge. Throughout the first half of 2014, no new evidence was found, no additional witness statements, and no signs Lena was alive or dead. Technical data collection mechanisms also dead-ended due to storage time limits from carriers, banks, and digital platforms. By September 2014, after completing the final full file review, the Augusta County Sheriff's Office and Prosecutor's Office agreed to classify Lena Mercer's disappearance as a cold case, transferring the file to the dedicated cold case unit. The official decision was signed on October 14, 2014. Lena Mercer's disappearance case was closed in an inconclusive status, awaiting new data. This was a temporary end to the entire initial investigation phase, lasting over a year, closing a period full of efforts, but no breakthroughs, leaving the biggest gap: the victim's body had never been found. After Lena Mercer's file was officially classified as a cold case in October 2014, the Augusta County Cold Case Unit proceeded with a review process of the entire 2013 original file under new standards applied to long-term disappearances, starting from evidence structure, evidence collection procedures, and digital analysis flows. During this review phase, investigators were not under time pressure like when the case was hot, allowing them to dissect each document, each field report to evaluate operational errors that may have caused the initial investigation to lack leads. First, they noted that over-reliance on initial search results in forests and ecological areas had caused the investigation team to underestimate other possibilities, particularly not clearly determining how Lena left home, or whether she actually left or was controlled right in enclosed space. The first error noted was not using the entire collected fabric samples from the torn fabric discovery area for microfiber testing. These samples were collected, but due to lack of priority at the time, the lab only ran preliminary tests to determine material, not compatibility with Lena's clothing. The second error was that security camera logs from the two nearest neighbors were only extracted for 48 hours from the missing report time, instead of full 7 days, as regulated in forced disappearance investigations. Therefore, the investigation team did not have baseline data on movements in the area before Lena returned home on the evening of October 3rd, making in-depth analysis of strange behavior or strange vehicles impossible. The third error related to digital forensic on the laptop. The data copy at that time was stored at a lower standard, not running deep recovery algorithms capable of restoring overwritten files. 2013 technology was not optimized for fragmented video files, so many segments potentially containing relevant content were not recovered. Fourth, analysis of soil, dust, fabric samples in Evans' vehicle was only compared to Ramsey's Draft and Blue Ridge Parkway, overlooking some geologically similar but closer areas, including 0.12 miles from the Mercer home. This led to the possibility that soil samples in Evans' vehicle, though not matching large search areas, could actually come from small unchecked locations. Fifth, the investigation group noted a shortfall in fully analyzing Evans' cell tower signals. 2013 analysis only focused on the disappearance night, not comparing multi-day prior movement cycles to find patterns. Modern digital behavior analysis shows comparing baseline data helps detect behavioral deviations, and this was a missed opportunity. Finally, they discovered in the file 3 small items: a hair strand collected from Evans' trunk, a transparent plastic piece, and a thin nylon cord, coded but not tested because at the time relevance could not be determined. These samples sat in storage for years without analysis due to limited technology at the time. But by 2015, micro-quantity DNA testing had developed enough to analyze ultra-small samples. However, because the cold case file was not reviewed in time, these 3 samples had never been processed. After systematizing all errors, the cold case unit proceeded to classify evidence by new priority levels. Class A, items needing forensic testing with current technology. Class B, digital data needing full recovery. Class C, geographic points never surveyed, but compatible with vehicle soil. Samples. Class D, statements with contradictions, needing re-interview when conditions allow. Class E, baseline data needing construction to re-evaluate Evan and related individuals' behavior. From there, the group set 3 new investigation goals. First goal, complete forensic analysis of all untested items, including hair, nylon and plastic piece, while rerunning microfiber tests on the torn fabric from the forest. Second goal, fully recover all digital data, especially deleted video files on Lena's laptop and router system logs, using forensic technology from 2015 onward. Third goal, build a microgeological map within a 5-mile radius around the Mercer home to compare with soil samples in Evans' vehicle, to identify a small but potentially decisive suspicious point. These goals were assessed as feasible, but because the cold case file was not high priority, the implementation process was delayed for many years, waiting for resources or a new event strong enough to reactivate the investigation. In 2016, when the Augusta County Sheriff's Office officially launched the project to upgrade the telecommunications data analysis system, the cold case unit included the Lena Mercer file in the first test group to apply new location algorithms, particularly the historical cell site simulation technique and the 3-dimensional signal inference modeling. Thanks to access to long-term archived data from the carrier, including reconstructed antenna configuration maps by period and actual 2013 broadcast signal strengths, investigators were able to run reverse simulations to more accurately estimate the locations of 2 phones, Lena's and Evans'. Previously, Lena's final ping had been located in an overly broad radius area, rendering it nearly useless for field investigations. But with the 2016 technology, the analysis team could measure power deviation differences in signals among 3 nearby cell towers, Mount Solon, Middle River, and Deerfield, thereby narrowing the probable signal area to a triangle of only about 0.8 square miles. This triangle was offset to the northwest of the Mercer home, not fully overlapping the area where outdoor evidence was found, but intersecting with a little-used dirt road leading to the edge of a private forest. Investigators noted that this area had never been searched in the initial phase because it did not appear in any reasonable travel routes based on the 2013 data. Additionally, Reprocessing Evans' cell data using the time-shift drift correction technology allowed detection of anomalies previously overlooked by the old system. In the 2013 report, two unusual pings from Evan between 1:38 and 1:52 a.m. were dismissed as network errors, since according to his statement, his phone was left in the bedroom at his parents' house. However, the 2016 analysis showed that both pings connected to a western cell tower, not the one serving the Mercer home area, and more importantly, the timing advance values were consistent with the device moving at 25-35 miles per hour. This clearly indicated that Evans' phone was on the road during the time frame that Timeline version 1.0 considered suspicious. The new algorithm also allowed determination of relative direction of travel. The first signal had a vector offset south-southwest, while the second shifted back northward. These vectors were not sufficient to pinpoint the exact route, but showed the phone had traveled in a loop before returning near the Pilot Hill Road area. When overlaying Evans' data with Lena's location triangle, investigators identified a small overlapping zone of about 300 meters, located near the intersection of an old trail and the aforementioned private forest land, a zone that had never appeared in any early search maps. This was designated as the new top suspect area in the 2016 file. After identifying the overlap zone, the analysis team proceeded to build a simulated travel route model based on topographic machine learning, in which the algorithm prioritized accessible dirt roads suitable for vehicles, with low slopes and low visibility to residents at night. The results revealed a second high-probability travel route on the night of October 3rd. 4. Starting from Pilot Hill Road, turning onto a side road down a small valley, looping around the edge of the private forest, and taking only about 6-8 minutes to reach the intersection with Lena's location triangle. The significance of resimulating this travel route was substantial. It indicated at least two important movements that night, one earlier, possibly while Lena was still alive, and a later one coinciding with the time frame the investigation team had suspected in the original Timeline version. The 2016 data also clarified for the first time that the later movement could involve a vehicle without needing headlights, and the algorithm specifically detected Evans' phone connecting to the western cell tower at a low emission angle, which only occurs when the device is in terrain-shielded areas like valleys or deep-rutted dirt roads. This reinforced the hypothesis that the vehicle had left residential areas and entered low-traffic terrain. The analysis team then employed signal reflection mapping technology, a signal reflection method based on physical maps simulating homes, hills, and tree canopies from 2013, to assess whether Lena's phone remained on and emitted minor movement signals between 10:06 and 10:18 p.m. The results did not confirm continuous movement, but showed slight signal strength variations sufficient to infer the phone may have been carried through an area with different obstructions compared to its home position. When replotting all data points on the 2016 GIS map, investigators realized the new suspect area not only had potential to contain victim traces, but was also near a point where Evans' simulated vehicle could have stopped briefly without detection. This was the first time since 2013 that a suspect area was narrowed to under 1 square mile. Although not yet sufficient for immediate searches, the 2016 report added the second travel route to the timeline and officially marked it as one of the key anomalies requiring verification upon case reopening. In 2017, after the enhanced cell data analysis report indicated the possible existence of a second travel route on the night Lena disappeared, the cold case unit decided to revisit a dataset previously deemed useless: traffic videos from security cameras along Route 11 and the Fort Defiance area. These cameras in 2013 had low resolution and poor lighting, mostly capturing only blurry shadows of passing vehicles, so the initial investigation team could not identify any suspicious vehicles. However, 2017 image processing technology, particularly the super-resolution reconstruction algorithm, allowed enhancement of details from blurry frames by synthesizing noisy pixels to reconstruct shapes. The technical team used backup videos obtained from VDOT in 2013, covering 4 cameras, 2 on Route 11 near Fort Defiance High School, 1 at the Route 11 609 intersection, and one older traffic camera in front of a convenience store half a mile away. Each video segment was processed through the system for 6/8x upscaling, edge restoration, high-speed noise reduction, and reflective light recognition based on optical models. Over 2 months of processing, the team discovered that many pixels previously dismissed as noise actually had uniform reflection structures consistent with the metallic silver paint of Evans' 2006 Subaru Forester, which has characteristic reflectivity under high-pressure sodium lights. The most critical frame was at 1:41 a.m. on October 4, 2013, a small SUV-sized vehicle heading south past the first Fort Defiance camera. After upscaling, identifying details such as the A-pillar angle, roof curvature, taillight shape, and distance between high-mounted brake lights were reconstructed with high reliability, allowing comparison to Evans' Subaru model. The match reached 87%, considered very high for low-resolution cameras. The technical team then cross-referenced video from the second camera about 0.7 miles away. The vehicle reappeared at 1 hour 43 minutes and 12 seconds a.m. with estimated speed 36 miles per hour, consistent with the cell data timing advance analysis showing Evans' phone moving at similar speeds. From these two sightings, the analysis team constructed the first segment of the primary suspect route, from near the Mercer home southward to Fort Defiance. After establishing a relatively accurate timeline, the team moved to the third camera at the Route 11, 609 intersection. This captured an image at 1:46 a.m. of a vehicle heading towards Stewart's Draft. Super resolution revealed a blurry driver silhouette inside. Though identity could not be confirmed, the head shape and position relative to the seat suggested a single occupant. Notably, the vehicle followed a trajectory shifted farther right than normal, assessed as consistent with deliberately avoiding the lighted area of the convenience store at the corner. Investigators interpreted this driving behavior as reducing light exposure, often associated with efforts to avoid camera capture, especially since the normal route did not require such steering. Based on these three cameras, the team reconstructed the primary suspect route. The vehicle left Pilot Hill Road between 1:38 a.m., headed east to Route 608, merged onto Route 11 southbound, past Fort Defiance, then turned southwest toward dirt roads, leading to the edge of the private forest, where Lena's and Evans' cell data overlapped. This route significantly matched the 2016 topographic model. When analyzing the fourth video in front of the convenience store near Dry Branch Road, the technical team detected a blurry frame at 2:11 a.m., showing the Subaru heading north again. Although license plate details could not be recovered, the timing and taillight characteristics reinforced the conclusion that the vehicle had completed a loop and returned to Pilot Hill Road after leaving the suspect area. This aligned with the second simulated travel route, which assumed a brief stop in the cell tower overlap zone. When sequencing the full video chain on a timeline, the team found that the gap between sightings from 1:46 to 2:11 a.m. allowed sufficient time for an action requiring stopping the vehicle and moving on foot in the forest for about 10-15 minutes. The investigation team assessed that while the image sequence was not direct legal evidence, it had very high directional value. It confirmed Evans' vehicle left the home area at a time he denied, traveled into a region consistent with both his cell data and Lena's final location zone. More importantly, reconstructing the primary suspect route with high accuracy allowed investigators for the first time since 2013 to identify a specific travel axis rather than broad terrain guesses. This opened opportunities to re-examine areas along the route, identify potential discrete stopping points, and particularly pinpoint the core area near the 2016 cell data intersection, now named Zone C4. The cold case unit marked Zone C4 as the primary suspect area for deeper analysis in the next phase, and the 2017 report officially added the primary suspect route to the cold case timeline, laying critical groundwork for the next investigation stage when resources permitted reopening. In 2018, when Google officially expanded its program to provide long-term archive data to investigative agencies under special court warrants, the Augusta County Cold Case Unit saw this as a golden opportunity to access a data type previously considered irretrievable, Evan Mercer's 2013 Google location history. Previously, the investigation only had semi-locational cell tower data, lacking precision, and unable to reflect minor stops or periods when the vehicle was stationary. But if recovered, Google location data, even in semantic location form, system-inferred points based on movement patterns, could significantly improve real road reconstruction. After nearly 2 months working with Google's legal team, the agency received an encrypted data package containing a portion of deleted location history still existing as raw compressed files on servers. Virginia State digital forensics experts used the Takeout Deep Parser tool, combined with machine learning, to reclassify fragmented data and recover missing timestamps. The results were far more surprising than initial expectations, although most of Evan's 2013 location history was deleted in April 2014. Because the location reporting feature automatically cached data during Wi-Fi connections, many location segments remained in metadata. The first notable point was a semantic stop, a point where the algorithm determined the device was stationary for over 3 minutes, around 1:57 a.m. on October 4th. This point was only about 0.4 miles west of the primary suspect route established in 2017, in an area with no residential addresses, no businesses, and no public Wi-Fi towers, yet close enough for the device to capture weak intermittent GPS signals, forming an irregular but interpolatable location chain. This was the first time digital data confirmed Evan's vehicle stopped at a specific location, rather than moving continuously, as he had claimed. The stop event, nature prompted investigators to immediately cross-reference with 2016 cell tower data. The 5-minute stop perfectly matched the time when Evan's cell signals shifted from southward to northward vectors, consistent with a vehicle stopping, the driver exiting to do something in the forest or on open land, then returning to continue. After circling the relative coordinates, the GIS room created a thin-layer topographic map, showing the area on a low moist strip of land beside a small trail leading down a shallow ravine. Notably, the geological characteristics, clay limestone soil, ash-brown color, low mica content, matched part of the soil sample composition collected from Evan's trunk in 2013. The research team rematched lithological composition using infrared spectroscopy, finding the 2013 soil sample 92% compatible with soil from along this ravine, while completely incompatible with areas like Blue Ridge Parkway or Ramsey's Draft. This shifted the entire assumption about potential crime scene locations. Upon deeper analysis of the Google location data, the technical team also detected 3 location drift points, where the device appeared to move slightly in an arc, while cell tower signals remained stably weak. This typically occurs when the phone is in a parked vehicle or carried by a stationary person in a high tree cover environment. These drift points, overlaid on the topographic map, lay on the slope leading from the trail down to the low area where seasonal water formed thin mud layers. Investigators thus hypothesized a high likelihood that the vehicle stopped at the road edge, while the person carrying the phone walked downhill about 20-30 meters. In the 2013 file, the SR report had excluded this area as outside the initial search radius and absent from old cell data. But now, with new cloud data, the entire suspect triangle shifted strongly westward. In the next analysis step, the digital forensics team reconstructed the activity timeline of Evan's 2013 phone from remaining data fragments, unlock frequency, acceleration changes, motion sensor connections. They detected a clear anomaly. The phone recorded an acceleration change at 1:51 a.m. similar to stepping out of a vehicle, then shifted to static for 4 minutes before light acceleration returned at 1:56. Consistent with footsteps back to the vehicle or door operation. This perfectly matched the Google location stop interval, forming a seamless logical chain. Vehicle stops, person exits, short movements, return vehicle resumes. To verify match degree, the team re-examined 2013 soil samples from Evans' trunk. The report built a micro-layer sediment map of the area, showing two characteristic particle types along the ravine: white flake mica and small round quartz grains. The 2013 sample lacked white mica, but contained a near-identical quartz-limestone mix. Investigators traced tectonic sources, finding that certain points on the 20-30-meter slope from the trail to the ravine had soil distribution matching the trunk sample, especially in areas inaccessible to vehicles but reachable on foot. This concluded that the trunk soil did not come from large forests, as previously hypothesized, but from a much smaller area near the unexplained Google location stop. When adding the data to the composite GIS map, the analysis team constructed Evan hypothesized Journey 01, extending the primary suspect route to 3 stops. Pilot Hill Road Route 11 Google location stop. This was assessed as the highest probability travel route on the night of October 3rd, 4, and the first time focusing investigation on the previously unsearched small ravine area. The cloud data also proved that the night's route was neither a homeward nor work-related path as Evan claimed, but a completely anomalous one absent from any other movement history. Most importantly, the Google location data package not only confirmed the stop, but directly linked Evan's presence to the 2013 soil geology, the first time two independent evidence sources reinforced each other, creating an irrefutable technical truth. Evan and the ravine area intersected during the time Lena disappeared. With this new piece, the entire investigation direction gradually pivoted away from broad forest areas and focused on a narrow but highly probable evidence-containing zone. After the 2018 Google location data confirmed Evan's presence at an unusual stop right within the time frame when Lena disappeared, the cold case unit assessed that the level of suspicion had exceeded the scope of a local investigation. In late 2018, they officially submitted a request for federal assistance to the FBI Richmond Field Office, asking for coordination in analyzing Evan's behavior, finances, and international travel history. Evan, who since 2015 had left Tennessee to work in Chile under a temporary technical contract. The FBI opened a support file as a consultation case, not an active investigation, but sufficient for them to collect data related to a U.S. citizen residing abroad. First, the behavioral analysis team reviewed Evan's entire itinerary in Chile using entry-exit records, employment contracts, and residency documents. They discovered that Evan maintained a relatively stable travel pattern from 2015 to 2017, working for an imaging equipment manufacturing company in Santiago. But starting in 2017, his schedule became irregular. Shorter stays, frequent changes of residence, travel between Santiago, Valparaiso, and Viña del Mar without any work-related logic. The FBI assessed this as a displacement pattern, a typical avoidance behavior in subjects who know they might be monitored in the future. When combining this data with the Google location report of the unexplained stop in 2013, the BOE evaluated that Evan likely had a clear awareness of the risk if the case were reopened and had proactively created geographical distance to make extradition or deportation difficult in the event of a criminal investigation. Parallel to the itinerary analysis, the FBI Financial Crimes Intelligence Unit conducted a review of Evan's financial transactions from 2014-2018. They identified 3 anomalies. First, immediately after leaving Virginia in early 2014, Evan withdrew nearly all his savings and split them into multiple deposits at different banks in Tennessee. A behavior consistent with structuring, though not reaching the level of federal violation, but enough to avoid attention. Second, upon moving to Chile, he avoided using U.S. credit cards for large transactions, switching instead to digital wallets and domestic transfers, making it harder to trace the flow of funds. Third, a 2016 transaction showed Evan transferring $4,800 USD to an account belonging to a Chilean individual, with no connection to his employer, no family relation, and no appearance in any of Evans' social networks. When the FBI contacted Interpol to check the identity, they discovered the account belonged to someone previously involved in brokering illegal short-term rentals, a service sometimes used by people wanting to stay without leaving an official trace. Although it could not be confirmed that the transaction was related to Lena's disappearance, the FBI assessed that Evans' deliberate avoidance of identity-linked U.S. financial channels for significant transactions was an indicator of long-term evasion behavior. The BO continued analyzing Evans' work emails during his time living in Chile. They noted that Evan maintained no stable social relationships outside the company environment, frequently declined group activities, and tended to change secondary email addresses every 6 to 8 months. These characteristics were labeled by the BAU as an avoidance lifestyle, a behavioral structure commonly seen in individuals harboring a major secret related to their past. When synthesizing all the data, the FBI provided a strategic assessment. Evan was not fleeing in a legal sense, but his financial and travel behavior showed clear avoidance, consistent with an individual who believed a domestic case could be initiated at any time. The federal report concluded that if the case were reinvestigated, Evan would very likely attempt to move to a third country or use informal financial channels to leave Chile. The FBI lacked authority to act since there was no arrest warrant or direct evidence of a crime, but their report was fully forwarded to Augusta County as a risk assessment. Evan was not only the primary suspect in the 2013 case, but also an individual with potential evasion behavior, requiring close monitoring if the case were reactivated. By 2021, when all the 2016 cell data, 2017 traffic video, 2018 cloud location data, and the FBI Behavioral Financial Report had formed a consistent structure of indirect evidence, the Cold Case Unit decided to proceed with reconstructing a comprehensive model of the route on the night Lena disappeared. Using the Trajectory Mapping Engine, a simulation tool for paths based on terrain parameters, timing, driving behavior, and cell tower signal distribution. Investigation team collected all relevant timestamps, 10:06 p.m. Lena's last ping at home, 1:41 a.m. Camera recording. A suspicious vehicle at Fort Defiance, 1:52, 1:57 a.m. Evans' Google location, showing the stop, 2:11 a.m. Vehicle heading back north, 2:27, 2:34 a.m. Evan returning to his parents' home per his initial statement, but unverified. They input this data into the software while configuring the 2013 terrain model to ensure the simulation results were not skewed from the actual conditions at the time of the incident. When running 200 simulations using an algorithm to find the highest probability optimal route based on 3 criteria: secrecy level, reasonable travel time, and alignment with the primary suspect's psychological profile, the model converged on one route with superior credibility. Evan left the Mercer home for the second time between 1:30, 1:38 a.m., took Route 608 to merge onto Route 11, and continued south. The vehicle reached Fort Defiance at 1:41 a.m., proceeded to the 11-609 intersection at 1:46 a.m. From there it turned onto a western dirt road, leading to a small valley, where Google location recorded the stop around 1:52, 1:57 a.m. Then returned to Route 11, appearing again on the convenience store camera at 2:11 a.m., before heading back to the Pilot Hill Road area. With the travel model relatively stabilized, the investigation team focused on the next critical step, identifying the 3 highest probability locations for body disposal based on digital data, geology, initial physical evidence, and behavioral factors. To do this, they deployed the Body Disposal Probability Matrix, a matrix evaluating the likelihood of a site being used for disposal, considering parameters, terrain difficulty, vehicle accessibility, frequency of human traffic, soil rock characteristics, matching the 2013 sample, feasible time window for the act, and potential for containers or materials hindering natural decomposition. After running the model, Three locations emerged with the highest probabilities. The first location, Zone C4, a small valley area, less than 60 meters from the Google location stop, including a shallow creek and surrounding low ground, had the highest soil composition match with the sample recovered from Evan's trunk. This area offered a major advantage for someone disposing of a body at night, due to its concave terrain, shielded by tree canopy, and natural drainage, reducing the chance of detection by odor compared to typical pine forest areas. It was also a region never searched during either 2013 search phase. The second location, a side road west intersecting a trail into private forest about half a mile from Route 609, where 2016 cell tower data showed consistent signal degradation, indicating Lena's phone may have been carried through an area with high obstruction density. The terrain here was steep with many natural rock cavities, suitable for disposal if the suspect wanted to minimize walking, but the soil did not fully match the 2013 sample, so it was ranked medium probability. The third location, a small elevated plot about 120 meters higher on the slope from Zone C4, where geological maps showed a layer of mixed silt and fine sand, composition somewhat similar to the 2013 sample, but less distinct. However, this point had a tactical advantage. The vehicle could stop right on the dirt road edge, requiring only a few steps downhill to access. When evaluated against the BAU behavioral model, this location fit the choice pattern of a suspect unfamiliar with deep terrain, preferring sites close to vehicle access to reduce risk. After aggregating probabilities, Zone C4 scored 61% in the evaluation model, the private forest location 23%, and the elevated plot 16%. Concurrently, the investigation team developed a 2022 renewed search plan in 3 phases. Phase 1. Pre-search survey, including drone LiDAR scans to build detailed layered ground maps, identifying potential hidden depressions or soil subsidence. Phase 2. Deployment of cadaver, 9s focused on Zone C4 and the other 2 locations. Phase 3. Verification excavation, including geophysical survey, with ground-penetrating radar to detect anomalies, possibly from burial. The team also coordinated with seasonal water flow experts to assess the possibility that remains were initially washed from the original site and lodged in the low ground of Zone C4. Risk factors in the plan were also considered: seasonal landslides, potential animal disturbance of the scene, and soil layer changes after nearly a decade. However, thanks to new digital data and realistic route modeling, the investigation team believed the probability of finding traces this time was significantly higher than in the 2013 searches. The 2021 strategic report concluded that Zone C4 was the search focal point and top priority location, regarded as the area where the victim was most likely present on the night of October 3rd. For 2013, and the 2022 plan was built around this area, with the expectation of breaking the case's biggest bottleneck: no body means no crime mechanism, no crime mechanism means no conclusion on the cause of disappearance. Through modeling the entire route on the night of the incident and identifying 3 key locations, the investigation had entered a strategically advanced state, creating a clear foundation for the renewed search phase in 2022. In March 2022, while Augusta County's active search plan was still in the preparation stage, a completely unexpected event occurred, shattering nearly a decade of stasis. A local hunter named Mark Dillard, while tracking deer in the valley west of Pilot Hill Road, less than 400 meters from Zone C4, accidentally spotted an object protruding from the layer of decayed leaves that he initially thought was animal bone. However, upon closer inspection, he realized the bone segment had an unusually round shape and thickness, unlike deer or wild boar bones he commonly encountered. Concerned it might be human bone, he immediately marked the location with a red cloth and called the sheriff's office emergency number. The information was promptly forwarded to the cold case unit, and within less than an hour, the area was secured with a temporary perimeter deployed under outdoor remains recovery protocol. The forensic field team established standard entry-exit paths to avoid any disturbance. Upon arrival, They observed the exposed bone consisted of a long segment, very likely a femur or humerus, lying offset on erosion-worn soil surface. Using stakes to mark, they expanded the examination area to an 8-meter radius and immediately found additional scattered bone structures, a detached skull fragment, several vertebrae, part of a rib, and a hand bone segment. The distribution pattern suggested the body may have once been intact at this location before being pulled apart by animals or dispersed by environmental factors. The surrounding area was assessed as terrain compatible with the Zone C4 prediction, narrow valley bottom, seasonal creek, obscured by tree canopy, and completely invisible from any highway. Subsequently, the forensic team set up a grid for systematic evidence collection. Each layer of leaves and topsoil was lifted using specialized tools to avoid impact. One of the first significant items to appear was a thin nylon cord, about 14 centimeters long, lying about 1 meter from the ribs. Preliminary comparison showed the material matched the nylon sample recovered from Evans' vehicle in 2013 but never tested. Soon after, they found a faded dark blue fabric piece, small in size, possibly from a jacket or cloth bag. This fabric had a weave pattern similar to the torn fabric piece found in 2013 less than a mile from this location. In the next collection wave, the team discovered a small metal bracelet with worn engraved patterns. Based on family file photos, this was highly likely the bracelet Lena wore daily. Although official identification required forensic testing, finding the personal item in the same area further reinforced the likelihood that the remains belonged to Lena. Additionally, a small plastic button recovered from moist soil, its color and size matching the sweater Lena wore on her last sighted day. Items requiring careful handling were packaged in layers, sealed and coated per regulation. Simultaneously, the GPR team was deployed to scan the area for initial burial site or disturbed soil structures. GPR detected an anomaly about 3 meters from where the bones were found, a large soil cavity shaped like an old dug pit depression. This led the investigation team to conclude that the body may have been initially buried shallowly in this pit, before being exposed and dragged downhill by animals or flooding in subsequent years. After completing bone collection, the forensic team conducted preliminary on-site classification. The remains were scattered, but approximately 60–70% complete, with the skull, though fractured, retaining morphological features consistent with an adult female. Femur length indicated a height of approximately 5'4" inches to 5'6", closely matching Lena's. Another important detail: the inner surface of ribs 4 and 5 showed unusual thinning, possibly related to external force or prolonged decomposition, but not ruling out pre-death trauma. At that point, the forensic team did not conclude cause of death, but the presence of the nylon cord and fabric linked to 2013 evidence allowed the assessment that this area was where Lena's body had been left, or at least present in the initial phase after disappearance. That same afternoon, the entire skeletal remains were fully collected, photographed, measured, and transported to the Virginia State Forensic Lab for official identification via dental comparison and DNA. Upon leaving the scene, the lead investigator noted a key point: the discovery location of the remains was precisely within the region. The 2021 model evaluated as highest probability, which not only validated the entire chain of technical analysis over nearly a decade, but also proved that the route on the night of October 3, 2013, had been accurately reconstructed. The discovery of the remains marked the biggest turning point in the case since Lena's disappearance. For the first time in nearly 10 years, the investigation had direct physical evidence confirming the victim's death, and a scene containing multiple indicators that could reconstruct the crime mechanism. From this point, the case was no longer an undetermined missing person, but officially shifted to a criminal homicide investigation with tangible evidence at the scene, refocusing all attention on Evan Mercer, the individual whose timeline, digital trail, and financial travel behavior aligned with the newly discovered area. At the Virginia State Forensic Laboratory, the skeletal remains recovered from the valley west of Pilot Hill Road were handed over to the forensic anthropology team specializing in processing remains that had undergone prolonged decomposition. The process began with mechanical cleaning of each bone fragment using specialized brushes and enzymatic solutions to remove the long-adhered debris. Once the bone structures were sufficiently clean for observation, the anthropology team proceeded to classify and reconstruct their anatomical positions. In total, there were more than 80 bone fragments, most of which belonged to long bones, the skull, ribs, and spine. The degree of scattering was consistent with a scene where wildlife could have interfered over an extended period. The initial phase of examination focused on three foundational parameters: sex, age, and height, factors that could establish biological identity prior to DNA testing. From the pelvic structure, the experts noted the wide angle of the greater sciatic notch, the curved subpubic arch, and the overall pelvic opening, all exhibiting characteristics typical of females. The skull, though partially damaged, was still sufficient to observe qualitative indicators such as a slightly sloping forehead, moderate brow ridge prominence, and underdeveloped temporal fossae, all aligning with the pattern of an adult female. The femurs, when measured for length and adjusted for post-decomposition shrinkage, indicated an estimated height of the victim in the range of 5'4", 5'6". Remarkably, almost perfectly matching Lena's recorded height of 5 inches in family medical records. For age, forensic anthropology relied on the degeneration of the pubic symphysis, dental wear, and the degree of cranial suture fusion. The results showed the victim to be in the age range of 27-33, consistent with Lena's age at the time of her disappearance. Upon completing the anthropometric analyses, the team moved on to evaluating bone injuries. Several right-side rib fragments showed unusual wear on the inner surfaces, in the form of edge abrasion, but without characteristics of animal gnawing. Microscopic examination under optical light revealed that this deformation occurred before the bones were exposed to long-term environmental impacts, a factor suggesting the possibility of trauma around the time of death. Notably, on the skull, the right temporal bone exhibited a thin oblique fracture running from the zygomatic process area up to the temporoparietal suture. This was not a fracture type caused by natural decomposition forces or soil pressure. The shape of the fracture, its sharpness, and the propagation pattern were all consistent with blunt force trauma or a strong impact against a hard object. Although it could not yet be determined whether the injury was the cause of death or occurred after loss of consciousness, the presence of antemortem trauma was a key factor in the initial assessment of the manner of death. Following the morphological analysis phase, the forensic team proceeded to the DNA-based identity verification process. Given that the remains had decomposed for nearly 10 years, DNA extraction required trace sequencing techniques. They selected the femur and lower molar as samples, as these are the two sites that best preserve DNA under natural conditions. The samples were finely ground in a sterile chamber, treated with EDTA solution to break down the mineral structure, and then subjected to multiple amplification cycles to recover STR segments. Comparison was performed against Lena's maternal DNA sample, stored since 2013 in the missing persons file. The analysis results showed matches across all recovered loci, with a probability of excluding an unrelated individual reaching 1 in tens of billions. With absolute matching on the recovered STR markers and mtDNA, the forensic lab confirmed the skeletal remains found in the valley west of Pilot Hill Road were those of Lena Mercer. Once identity was confirmed, the forensic team continued to examine the rib and skull injuries in greater depth to determine whether the victim had suffered blunt force trauma prior to death. In the rib analysis, the edge abrasion and flattened horizontal scratches indicated the possibility of strong compression or squeezing in the chest area, although it could not be confirmed whether this was due to nylon cord or another object. Further examination under scanning electron microscopy revealed repeated micro-damage patterns on the bone surface, consistent with compressive force mechanisms. On the skull, the fracture had uniformly sharp edges without signs of animal fragmentation, proving it was antemortem or prior to advanced decomposition. This injury could have caused immediate loss of consciousness or left the victim weakened and unable to defend herself, but it could not be confirmed as the direct cause of death. However, combined with the absence of gunshot wounds, stabbing, or sharp force trauma on the remains, the forensic team concluded that the manner of death was most likely not accidental, not self-inflicted, and more consistent with violence inflicted by another person. Continuing to survey smaller bones, they discovered a complete fracture on the distal phalanx of the right second finger, with forensic biology indicating the injury occurred near the time of death. This could be evidence of the victim resisting or suffering force when her hand was squeezed or pulled. Another feature was a long vertical scratch on the posterior surface of the left tibia, resembling a drag mark against a hard object when the body was pulled, unlike natural decomposition damage. When compiling all the injuries, the forensic team concluded Lena was most likely struck on the head, then subjected to mechanical force, causing injuries to the chest and hand, consistent with a pattern of the victim being subdued, forcibly moved, and dying under unnatural circumstances. Although the exact time of death could not be determined, analysis of bone mineral dissolution and debris distribution indicated that the body was placed in the valley area within the first few days after disappearance, rather than being moved there years later. With identity confirmed by DNA and the presence of antemortem trauma, Lena's remains officially shifted the case from the missing persons category to a homicide investigation, opening an entirely new direction for the authorities after nearly a decade of deadlock. After confirming the remains belonged to Lena Mercer and documenting the antemortem injuries, the next step for the investigative team was to cross-reference all evidence collected at the 2022 scene with the remaining samples from the 2013 file to complete the physical evidence chain, an essential condition to transform a nearly decade-long speculative case file into one capable of prosecution. The soil analysis team first compared two samples: the soil collected from the bottom of Valley Zone C4, where the remains were found in 2022, and the soil previously recovered from the front tire tread of Evans' vehicle in 2013. The 2022 sample was analyzed using infrared spectroscopy and mass spectrometry, revealing a composition of ashy brown loam mixed with rounded quartz, very low black mica content, and light hematite trace distribution, a rather rare geological combination in the Blue Ridge area, but concentrated in the western ravine strip of Pilot Hill Road. When running the 2013 sample through enhanced resolution processing, the lab found they shared three rare characteristics: one rounded fine-grained quartz structure with high uniformity and size, two similar loam-clay ratio with less than 5% error, and three sparse granular hematite traces, hallmarks of soil eroded by seasonal streams. The conclusion was reached: the soil in Evans' vehicle and the soil beneath Lena's body had a 91% compatibility match, unusually high and excluding most other areas within a 10-mile radius. This was the first time investigators could scientifically prove that Evans' vehicle had been present at the location where the body was dumped. The results were immediately forwarded to the textile materials analysis team for comparison of fiber samples collected from the 2022 scene. One key piece of evidence was a dark green fabric fragment found a few meters from the remains. The forensic team compared it to the torn fabric piece recovered in 2013 outside the woods and the microscopic fibers obtained from Evans' car seat during the initial search. Under polarized light microscopy, the 2022 fabric fibers showed a smooth weave polyester structure, fiber diameter of 12-14 micrometers, and dye belonging to the phalocyanine group, a dark green pigment commonly used in early 2010s sportswear. When running Raman spectroscopy to determine molecular structure, the sample showed an 86% spectral match with fibers from Evans' rear seat. Although 86% was not sufficient for absolute conclusion, combined with color, diameter, and weave analysis, the lab affirmed that the two samples were highly likely to have had direct contact during the same event or transport process. Even more notable, was that the 2013 torn fabric recovered near the Western Trail also had the same polyester weave and phthalocyanine dye group, a coincidence too significant to ignore when three fabric samples from two different years, 2013 and 2022, shared the same material properties. This led the investigative team to conclude that the 2022 fabric fragment was most likely a remnant of the same type of fabric torn when Lena was dragged or moved through the forested terrain. When comparing the discovery locations of the fabric pieces with the primary suspected route reconstructed from cell data, traffic videos, and Google location, the evidence trail nearly perfectly aligned: the 2013 fabric along the trail leading into the depression, the 2022 fabric right next to the body, and the fibers in Evan's trunk matching the weave type. This created a physical movement chain, demonstrating the victim's presence in the vehicle and at the dump site. The next evidence analysis step involved the nylon cord recovered at the 2022 scene. The cord was 14 centimeters long, opaque white, small diameter, and twisted structure suitable for light tying. Surface testing revealed thin abrasion and stretch marks consistent with forceful binding rather than cutting. When compared to the nylon cord recovered from Evan's vehicle in 2013, a sample never previously tested, both shared similar polymer structure and UV stabilizer group. This did not prove the two segments came from the same source, but in the absence of a reasonable explanation for a matching cord appearing at the body location, it became a critical detail in the chain of incriminating evidence. Upon completing the soil, fiber, and polymer comparisons, the forensic team began sequencing the timeline: 2013 fabric fragment fibers in Evan's vehicle, 2022 fabric at scene body locase, matching soil in Evan's vehicle, and Zone C4. All physical links pointed to the same route, the same person, and the same location on the night of October 3, 2013. To strengthen the evidence chain, the forensics team reopened fiber samples collected from the Mercer home carpet in 2013. A dark green polyester fiber was re-extracted using next-generation molecular scanning, and results showed it shared the same pigment characteristics as the 2022 fabric. This proved that Lena's clothing was damaged inside the home before she left, consistent with the hypothesis that the violent event occurred very early, between 9:15 and 9:30 p.m. Adding this factor to the evidence structure made the chain seamless: clothing damage in the home, fabric fragment on the trail, fibers in Evan's vehicle, fabric beside the remains. This is a classic evidence transfer pattern in cases involving forced victim transport by personal vehicle. When synthesizing all data, the cold case unit assessed that the linkage rate between 2013 and 2022 samples reached an unprecedented level of persuasiveness: matching soil, matching fabric, matching polymer, matching route, and DNA confirmed victim identity. These were no longer disparate indirect data chains, but had become a continuous physical evidence system extending from inside Lena's home to the body dump site. Completing this evidence chain was the decisive factor in moving the case out of the speculative technical file category and into one that could be presented to prosecutors for subsequent criminal proceedings. Based on the fully linked physical evidence chain between 2013 and 2022, along with cell, cloud, video, and geological data, the cold case unit proceeded to construct the complete timeline version 2.0. The first model to fully and comprehensively describe the entire sequence of events on the night of October 3, 2013, into the early morning of October 4, 2013, with complete substantiation. This was the most critical step in over a decade of investigation, aimed at establishing the sequence of events, timing of violence, movement behavior, and body disposal process based on objective technical data rather than inference. The timeline began with Lena's last confirmed action, 9:15 p.m. Neighbor camera recorded her entering the home. Digital analysis showed no phone, computer, or router activity after 9:17 p.m., meaning she performed no routine activities. Based on fibers in Lena's home carpet, the investigative team determined the timing of clothing damage or violent contact to be between 9:15 and 9:25 p.m., the short window immediately after she entered. With skull trauma indicating a strong impact before death, Timeline 2.0 identified 9:20–9:30 p.m. as the period of the initial assault inside the home. The next data point was the yard light turning off at 10 o'clock p.m., aligning with neighbor testimony of hearing a car door slam around 10:10 p.m. In this timeline version, the light turning off was no longer viewed as accidental, but as a concealment measure to reduce visibility when removing the victim from the home. Evans' cell data fluctuating between two towers from 9:31 to 10:12 p.m. was now integrated into the probability model. His device had moved away from the Verona apartment despite his denial. When combined with 2017 traffic video, the reconstruction showed Evans' vehicle did not appear on cameras along his usual route home that night. All these factors converged into the Timeline 2.0 conclusion. 9:30–10:10 p.m. was the period of victim control and preparation for removal from the home. Transport analysis based on fabric fibers and fragments along the trail, data indicating the victim or her clothing had rough contact with surfaces when being removed. Microscopic fibers in Evans' trunk, matching the 22 scene fabric, led the new timeline to affirm the victim was transported in Evans' vehicle between 10:15–10:25 p.m. Cross-referencing cell and cloud data showed no major activity from Lena's phone after 10:06, proving the phone was left in the home while the victim was removed without it, consistent with forced transport. The next step in Timeline 2.0 was analyzing the early morning October 4th journey by integrating data from the Fort Defiance camera, cell tower, Google location, and soil matching results. 1:41 a.m., Fort Defiance camera recorded the suspected Subaru. 1:57 a.m., Google location recorded an unexplained stop at the slope leading to a small ravine, where soil perfectly matched both Evans' vehicle sample and Zone C4. Evans' phone accelerometer data showed he exited the vehicle, stood still for several minutes, then returned. Combining all, Timeline 2.0 determined the body disposal occurred precisely in the 1:57 a.m. window at the ravine area, the site where remains were later found. Traffic video at 2:11 a.m. confirmed the vehicle heading north, ending the disposal journey. Simulation of body disposal based on terrain slope data, bone distribution, and seasonal water flow showed the body was initially placed or shallowly buried at a point 10–16 feet higher than the discovery location. Water flow and animals displaced bone parts over time, but the GPR detected depression matched the original burial site. The complete timeline concluded the event sequence as follows. 1:9:15–9:25 p.m. Initial violence in the home. 2:9:30–10:10 p.m. Preparation and removal of victim from home, turning off light to reduce visibility. 3:10:15–10:25 p.m. Victim loaded into Evans' vehicle. 4 approximately 1:30–1:41 a.m. Vehicle, traveling route 60811. 5 1:52–1:57 a.m. Stop at Zone C4, body disposal 6:11 a.m. Vehicle leaves area, heads north. 7 All evidence from home. Trail vehicle, Zone C4, forming a seamless physical chain. This was the first time in the Lena Mercer file that multi-source data, cell, cloud, video, soil, fibers, DNA, converged to describe an inseparable logical structure. Timeline 2.0 not only accurately reconstructed the October 3rd, 4 journey, but also carried strong legal weight by transforming scattered suspicions into a complete sequence presentable to prosecutors as the foundation for charges. When the complete timeline version 2.0 was finalized, and the entire chain of evidence, soil fibers, cloud data, cell data, traffic video, converged on the same conclusion, the cold case unit assessed that there were sufficient operational grounds to conduct another interview with Evan Mercer. The first one since 2013. The interview was conducted as a non-custodial interview at the U.S. Consulate in Santiago, Chile, coordinated by the FBI legal attaché and 2 Augusta County investigators. The goal was not to obtain a confession, but to directly confront each point in Timeline 2.0 and document contradictions, points that would be used in the affidavit for an arrest warrant. The interview began with Evan being allowed to freely recount his entire schedule for the night of October 3, 2013. He repeated the same old story, stayed home all night, went to sleep at 11 p.m. until morning, did not drive, had not seen Lena since the previous day. The investigators let him speak uninterrupted before presenting the new data. In the first step, they confronted his statement of not leaving the house with the enhanced 2016 cell data analysis. They presented the signal vector map showing Evan's phone moving at 25-35 miles per hour between 1:38–1:52 a.m. and emphasized that the 2016 positioning algorithm's accuracy no longer fell within the previous margin of error. Evan appeared tense, but responded that the phone could have picked up stray signals on its own. The investigators noted this as the first contradiction, because a phone cannot move between cell towers without physical displacement. The contradiction was documented under legal standards. The subject denied objective data without providing a reasonable mechanism. Next, the team moved to the 2017 traffic video. They showed enhanced frames in which a Subaru, with highly matching characteristics to Evan's vehicle, appeared at Fort Defiance at 1:41 a.m. Evan looked at the screen, but refused to confirm it was his car. When asked to explain why his vehicle would appear on a route nearly 10 miles from his apartment, he requested an attorney. Under non-custodial interview rules, he was allowed to end the session, but the investigators continued asking questions before closing. If you were home, why was the car at Fort Defiance? Evan did not answer. This was recorded as the second contradiction. Vehicle imagery completely contradicting the statement. When they shifted to the 2018 cloud data, the interview entered a phase where Evan could no longer maintain his calm demeanor. The investigators presented the recovered Google location data, showing a prolonged stop from 1:52–1:57 a.m., matching the location of Zone C4, where Lena's remains were found. Evan reacted strongly, denying he used Google location or even had GPS enabled. However, the team explained clearly that this data was not dependent on the user turning GPS on or off, but was recorded in system cache when the phone connected to Wi-Fi or sent background signals. When asked, "How do you explain your device stopping exactly at the location where Lena's body was later found?" Evan remained silent, offering no explanation. The third contradiction was recorded: the unexplained presence of the device at the body disposal site. Afterward, the investigators questioned him about the 2013 soil sample from his car tires, showing a 91% match with soil from Zone C4. Evan said his car might have passed through that area long ago, but the team countered that in 2013, he had never had any legitimate reason to enter the private forest west of Pilot Hill Road, an area that does not lead to any public route and can only be accessed by deviating from the normal path. This was the fourth contradiction: the mismatch between possible travel routes and the actual route evidenced. In the final step of the interview, the investigators confronted the chain of physical fiber evidence, from fibers in Lena's home carpet, fabric fragments near the trail, fibers in Evan's car, and fabric found next to the remains. All were presented via a timeline diagram showing the continuous transfer of material from the victim's home to the disposal site. When asked if he could explain why fibers from Lena's clothing appeared in his car, Evan replied, "I drove her many times, fibers could have fallen off." This was noted but did not resolve the combination of 3 fabric samples from 3 different locations in a movement trajectory, perfectly matching Timeline 2.0. After more than 3 hours of questioning, Evan declared he was ending the session and demanded that all further questions go through his attorney. The investigators recorded 4 major contradictions: 1, the did not leave home statement contradicting cell data; 2, denial of movement despite traffic video capturing the vehicle; 3, denial of presence at Zone C4 despite cloud data placing his device exactly at the body location; 4, refusal to explain the evidence chain, offering only unreasonable justifications. The interview ended without a confession, but the primary objective was achieved, fully documenting contradictions, valuable in proving the subject provided false statements, thereby creating strong legal grounds for an arrest warrant under the probable cause standard. After compiling the interview transcript, Timeline 2.0 comparison, forensic reports, DNA, cloud data, cell data, and all linked physical evidence, the lead investigator and the Augusta County prosecutor began preparing the arrest warrant application, marking the official transition of the case from analytical investigation to prosecutorial investigation. When the arrest warrant application was completed, with the full chain of physical and digital evidence and the contradictions documented during the consulate interview, the Augusta County prosecutor formally submitted the request for an international arrest warrant for Evan Mercer in June 2022. The warrant was issued under the probable cause standard and forwarded to Interpol as a red notice, allowing Chilean law enforcement to detain Evan pending extradition proceedings. Immediately after the red notice was published, Chilean police, coordinating with the FBI legal attaché in Santiago, placed Evan under close surveillance, including his new residence, travel routes, and daily habits. On July 18, 2022, as Evan was leaving his rented apartment in Providencia to go to work, officers from the Policía de Investigaciones executed the arrest under proper international procedures. Evan was handcuffed on the spot, offered no resistance, but immediately requested legal representation. As PDI conducted an emergency search of the apartment under a Chilean court order, they seized 2 laptops, a 2 terabytes external hard drive, and several handwritten documents. All devices were sealed and transferred to the Chilean digital forensics team under FBI supervision for data extraction prior to incorporation into the extradition process. It was during the analysis of the 2 terabytes hard drive that investigators discovered an AES-256 encrypted hidden file located in the system folder of a photo editing software. When decrypted using standard tools, it revealed a series of documents Evan had personally saved, not a diary, but a personal timeline recording time points from the night of October 3, 2013. The file contained 47 entries, each a line describing time and location, 9:18. She entered the house, 10:02, backyard light off. 1:42, past Fort Defiance, 1:55, stop point. Although it contained no detailed description of actions, the fact that Evan had recorded exact points perfectly matching the cell, video, and cloud data that investigators had spent nearly 10 years recovering showed he had intentionally tracked, remembered, and stored the body disposal journey. In another entry, investigators found the line, "Never go back there again." The existence of this self-created timeline became extremely powerful digital evidence because it proved Evan had clear awareness of the journey on the night of the incident, completely contradicting his statements of remembering nothing and not leaving the house. The FBI immediately backed up the entire hard drive, packaged it to standards, and forwarded it to the U.S. prosecutor to supplement the extradition file. In late July 2022, the Chilean court held a hearing to determine the legality of the international arrest. The FBI representative presented the evidence chain, DNA matching the remains, soil in Evan's car, matching soil at the discovery site, cloud and cell data, confirming device presence at the disposal location, traffic video, placing his vehicle on the disposal route, and most recently, the personal timeline from the hard drive. Evan's attorney opposed extradition on grounds that the file relied on speculative interpretation, but the Chilean court rejected this, affirming that the file met the dual standard, independent physical and digital evidence, reinforcing each other. On August 12, 2022, Chile formally approved Evan Mercer's extradition to the United States. Evan was escorted onto a Santiago, Atlanta flight under U.S. Marshals supervision, then transferred onward to Virginia. Upon landing, the state arrest warrant was activated immediately. Evan was handcuffed and taken directly to the Augusta County Jail with no media contact permitted. The successful extradition marked the largest legal turning point in the case, from a nearly decade-long cold case. The Lena Mercer disappearance now had a detained suspect, comprehensive evidence, and a timeline created by the suspect himself, something no investigative agency could have predicted would exist, becoming the key link moving the case to the criminal trial phase. Immediately after extradition to Virginia and transfer to the Augusta County Jail, Evan Mercer was subjected to post-extradition federal standard questioning. This time, in a secure room at the State Criminal Investigation Division, where the entire new evidence chain, from the remains, soil samples, fibers, cell data, cloud data, traffic video, to the personal timeline extracted from the hard drive, was arranged into a system with no remaining logical gaps. The session took place with the prosecutor's representative, lead investigator, and a digital forensics expert present, while Evan, lightly handcuffed per regulations, sat opposite, his face showing no clear emotion, but continually observing each detail presented. The investigator opened by describing the International Red Notice extradition process, to emphasize that Evan's return to the U.S. was not based on speculation, but on evidence levels deemed sufficient by Chile for approval. They then presented the first layer of evidence, the remains found at the edge of Ramsey's Draft Wilderness, with DNA matching 99.998% to Lena's mother's sample. Upon hearing Lena's name, Evan slightly clenched his jaw but said nothing. The investigators continued with the anthropological report, showing pre-death trauma consistent with assault rather than accident or natural causes. Evan looked down at the table, hands lightly gripping. The prosecutor did not demand answers, only reminding him that all statements were recorded and he had the right to remain silent or request counsel. They moved to the second layer, soil analysis. The soil collected from Evan's wheel wells and trunk in 2013, once considered meaningless due to lack of comparison, now perfectly matched the soil at the body discovery site. Evan glanced quickly at the micromineral comparison report, but showed no reaction. The investigator simply asked, "How do you explain soil from the crime scene matching soil in your car?" Evan did not answer, only saying, "I want to speak with my attorney." The request was noted, but under procedure they retained the right to continue presenting evidence without direct questions. The third layer, fibers. A small dark blue fiber, recovered from the ligature around the neck, found next to the remains, was identified as polyester cotton blend, matching both weave code and fabric from Evan's rear car seat. Microscopic fiber distortion frequency analysis showed near certain commonality of source. When the microscopic images were displayed, Evan narrowed his eyes briefly, then turned to stare at the wall, as if avoiding the investigator's gaze. The next layer presented was decisive. Reanalyzed 2016 cell data combined with 2018 recovered cloud data and 2017 enhanced traffic video. As maps showing Evan's device route, matching the vehicle route through Fort Defiance between 1:40 to 10 a.m. on the night Lena vanished were displayed. The prosecutor stated clearly, this data could not be faked or manipulated in 2013. It reflects the actual route of the device associated with you. Evan closed his eyes for a few seconds, but remained silent. The investigator continued. Even if you say you didn't leave home, your device says otherwise. And the cloud data, even if you thought it was deleted, still recorded an unexplained stop at the exact location where the remains were found. Evan folded his arms, leaning slightly back in his chair, almost evading the maps. Finally, they presented the heaviest evidence, Evan's personal timeline, the encrypted file found on the seized Chilean hard drive. When the page displaying the line 142 past Fort Defiance appeared, perfectly matching the obtained cell data, the investigator looked directly at Evan. No one but you could have created this file. It reflects each time point of the journey, transporting Lena's body from the house. You recorded it, you saved it, and you thought no one would find it. Evan gripped his hand so tightly, his knuckles turned white, but said nothing. The prosecutor continued showing other lines. 155, stop point. Never go back there again. Evan turned his head away, lips pressed tightly, when the investigator asked, "Do you want to explain why this timeline exists?" Evan said, "Only one sentence. I invoke my right to remain silent." From that point, the law required investigators to cease all accusatory questions, but they retained the right to inform Evan that the file had moved to the prosecution phase. The prosecutor formally read the decision based on the chain of physical, digital, anthropological, behavioral evidence and documents created by the suspect himself. Augusta County authorities issued an indictment on 3 charges: first-degree murder, unlawful disposal of a body, and obstruction of investigation by providing false information. Evan showed no strong reaction, only nodding slightly when asked to confirm he had heard the charges clearly, but did not enter a plea. The session ended with Evan being returned to his cell, while the prosecution completed evidence-sealing procedures in preparation for the preliminary hearing. This marked the point where the case officially entered the criminal trial phase, signifying the shift from investigation to prosecution based on a closed evidence system. The criminal trial opened in late October 2022 at the Augusta County Circuit Court. Amid close media coverage in Virginia, due to the case's unique nature, a nearly decade-long missing person file revived through modern forensic technology, leading to the arrest and extradition of the suspect from Chile. At the trial's opening, the prosecutor presented the indictment to the 12-member jury, emphasizing that the entire evidence chain collected across 2 phases, 2013, and the reinvestigation from 2016 to 2022, formed a seamless structure eliminating all alibi possibilities and proving Evan Mercer's mechanism of crime on the night of October 3, 2013. The prosecutor began with the core forensic evidence, the remains discovered in Ramsey's Draft Wilderness, with expert conclusions identifying them as belonging to a woman perfectly matching Lena in age, height, bone ratios, and anthropometric features. 2022 DNA matched 99.998% with Lena's mother's sample. The prosecutor called the forensic anthropologist to explain to the court the pre-death trauma on ribs and jawbone, stressing that these injuries could not have been caused by animals post-mortem and were inconsistent with a natural accident. Next, the prosecutor moved to the physical evidence chain, the soil adhering to Evan's wheel wells collected in 2013, once deemed meaningless, now analyzed with new mineralogy technology and exactly matching the soil at the discovery site. A geomineralogy expert presented diagrams of mineral composition, mica particle frequency, soil layering structure, and organic ratios, proving extremely high compatibility, drawing jury attention because it cut off the defendant's ability to deny ever visiting the area. The prosecutor continued with the polyester cotton fiber found on the neck ligature, matching fibers from Evan's rear seat in both weave code and dye particle structure. The fiber expert stated the probability of random coincidence was near zero. After the physical evidence layer, the prosecutor shifted to digital forensics, the decisive element in reviving the cold case. The cell data expert presented pings from Evan's device on the night of the disappearance, clearly showing movement away from the Mercer home between 1:38–1:42 a.m., crossing Fort Defiance and entering the mountain area. The cell triangulation map was projected on a large screen, enlarged to show absolute overlap between the cell route and the body location. The prosecutor emphasized, Evan always said he never left home. But his phone tells a different story, a statement that had strong impact on the jury. Next, the prosecutor called the cloud forensics expert to present the 2018 recovered Google location data, including an unexplained stop at 1:55 a.m., directly atop the hillside where the remains were found. Recovery reports from Google servers, even if deleted on the device, retained full metadata. At this point, the prosecutor moved to the most shocking part, the personal timeline file Evan created and hid in the encrypted Chilean hard drive. The encryption forensics expert explained how the file was protected by AES 256, buried under a fake folder in photo processing software. When opened, the jury saw the time points: 1:42 past Fort Defiance, 1:55 stop point, never go back there again. The prosecutor argued that this was not an accidental diary, but an intentional record to track and control information. After more than 3 hours of presentation, the prosecutor concluded the opening with Timeline 2.0, a technical simulation reconstructing the entire body disposal journey on October 3rd, including Lena's last known time, the gap in Evan's statement, cell route, vehicle route, evidence locations, and finally the disposal site. The jury appeared visibly tense, some members taking constant notes, while Evan maintained an impassive expression. When it was the defense's turn, Evan's attorney focused on the traditional weakness of technical investigations, cell data reliability, and forensic margin of error. The attorney argued that cell towers are not GPS. Pings can reflect off mountainous terrain, causing positional errors. They cited studies on signal variation in the Appalachians to suggest Evan's device route could be misinterpreted as movement when in reality it never left home. They also attacked the cloud data by arguing that server recovery does not prove the subject was carrying the device. Next, the attorney addressed the physical evidence, polyester cotton fibers. They argued that polyester cotton is widely used in upholstery, and matching fibers does not absolutely mean fibers from Evan's car seat. They suggested considering possibilities of wind carrying or animals dragging fibers from another source to the body site. Regarding the soil, they countered that the 2013 sample had undergone long storage, with risks of contamination or cross-contamination that could not be fully ruled out. The next argument centered on the encrypted timeline. The defense claimed it could be a memo file related to one of Evan's filming projects, not necessarily tied to the night Lena disappeared. The time points could have different meanings, and interpreting the timeline as incriminating was imposing the prosecution's meaning on an ambiguous document. The defense's climax came when the attorney called an independent radio wave analysis expert to rebut the cell data conclusions. The expert acknowledged that 2022 positioning technology is superior to 2013, but argued that extrapolating old data carries error and cannot be 100% certain the device moved along the presented route. However, during cross-examination, the prosecutor asked the expert one question: can you refute that the cell data, cloud data, traffic video, and personal timeline all coincide at the same locations and times? The expert was forced to answer, I cannot refute that multi-data convergence. This response drew more jury attention than any prior argument. Finally, the prosecution's forensics expert was recalled to dismantle the defense points. He emphasized that cell tower error never creates multi-mile travel routes. Cloud data is server-side and unfalsifiable. Fabric and soil evidence have distinctive matching patterns not as common as the defense described. And the encrypted timeline is extremely strong behavioral evidence that cannot be explained innocently. When the prosecutor asked, in your opinion, is this coincidence possible? The expert replied briefly, the probability is lower than being struck by lightning 3 times in one day. The answer silenced the courtroom for several seconds, after which the judge declared the end of arguments between the parties. The trial entered its most critical phase, deliberation. The jury was instructed to retire to the deliberation room, taking with them the entire case file of physical evidence, forensic reports, cell data diagrams, cloud data, enhanced traffic videos, forensic anthropology documents, and especially the printed encoded timeline created by Evan himself. The discussion lasted many hours, with an initial divide between members who found the chain of technical evidence absolutely convincing and those who were still weighing the defense's arguments about potential errors in location methods. In the early stages, some jurors pointed out that there were no direct witnesses and no camera capturing Evan moving with Lena on the night of October 3, 2013. However, others countered that the nature of a body concealment case, lasting nearly 10 years, required evaluating a strong chain of circumstantial evidence, and that the convergence of multiple layers of data, not just cell data, but also cloud data, soil evidence, fabric fibers, the location where the remains were found, and the encoded timeline created a logical system that could not have occurred by chance. One juror requested to review the simulated journey from 1:30–2:30 a.m. on the night of the incident, cross-referencing it with device pings and timeline markers, concluding that this level of alignment could not be random. Another member requested to revisit the anthropological report on pre-death trauma marks, emphasizing that Lena did not die from an accident or self-infliction, completely ruling out the possibility that Evan was merely coincidentally present in the area. As the discussion deepened, the jury returned to the central question whether Evan's actions were proven to be intentional and premeditated or merely impulsive, leading to Lena's death. Some argued that the encoded timeline demonstrated a level of control after the incident, but was insufficient to conclude that the initial killing was premeditated. Many members agreed that the evidence of motive remained weak. There were no major financial disputes, no signs of prolonged violence, no threatening letters or history of conflict. However, in the preliminary vote, all agreed that Evan was directly involved in the death. The discussion shifted to weighing between first-degree and second-degree murder. After more than 5 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously concluded that the evidence did not prove Evan had planned in advance to kill Lena, but his actions of transporting the body, concealing it, creating the encoded timeline, and intentionally obstructing the investigation showed he fully knew he had caused the death and intended to cover it up. Therefore, they voted nearly unanimously for second-degree murder instead of first-degree. When the jury returned to the courtroom, the judge instructed the defendant to stand for the verdict. The foreperson read slowly, "We, the jury, after considering all the evidence, find the defendant Evan Mercer guilty of second-degree murder." Evan closed his eyes for a few seconds, but showed no change in expression. The prosecution maintained a restrained demeanor, while Lena's family broke into silent tears. The defense noted the verdict, but indicated they would consider an appeal later. The trial moved to the sentencing phase. The prosecution requested a sentence of 45–50 years, emphasizing the concealment of the body for nearly a decade and the effort to evade justice by leaving the U.S. and living in a non-extraditable status. The defense requested a lower sentence, arguing that Evan had no prior criminal record, had cooperated in some phases of the investigation, and there was no proof of a brutal murder motive. The judge took time to review the entire file, including the pre-sentence report, case context, severity of the conduct, and the long-term impact of the body concealment on the victim's family. Finally, the judge read the sentence. The court sentences the defendant Evan Mercer to 40 years imprisonment for second-degree murder, along with additional sentences for unlawful handling of a body and obstruction of investigation, to be served concurrently with the primary sentence. The 40-year figure was chosen based on the severity of the consequences, the prolonged concealment, and the need for deterrence. As he was escorted out of the courtroom, Evan showed no strong reaction, only casting a brief glance toward the prosecution and Lena's family before lowering his head and walking away. This verdict closed one of the longest investigations in Augusta County history, turning a 2013 cold case into a 2022 conviction through the combination of advanced forensic technology and the persistence of the investigative team. The 40-year sentence for Evan Mercer closed the case legally, but opened a phase of operational review that many investigative units in Virginia consider an important case study for long-term missing persons files without a body. Upon reviewing the nearly 9-year process, investigators identified 3 key steps that turned the tide. First was the preservation of evidence from 2013, particularly soil samples and microfibers collected from Evan's vehicle, even though there was nothing to compare them to at the time. This was crucial for reactivating the case when the skeletal remains were found. If these items had not been properly sealed or had been discarded, the 2022 forensic chain would lack the foundation to prove an undeniable link between the defendant's vehicle and the burial site. Second was the cell data and cloud data. Although technology in 2013 was limited, Retaining the original records allowed experts in 2016, 2018 to reanalyze using modern location algorithms and recover Google location data from servers. No single detail was enough to prove the crime, but when integrated fully, movement pings, unusual stops, the route through Fort Defiance, the full picture became clear. Third, and most importantly, was the discovery of the hard drive in Chile containing the personal timeline. This was a rare type of behavioral evidence, and according to operational assessment, without the red notice leading to device seizure, even strong forensic pieces could have been weakened by the defense in court. The encoded timeline linked all data layers, establishing the defendant's awareness of the night's journey and proving systematic deception over nearly a decade. Regarding new forensic technologies, this case demonstrated the growing role of micromineral analysis, forensic GIS, AI-enhanced video resolution, and cloud data recovery. Previously, a nobody missing persons case was often seen as nearly impossible to prosecute due to lack of evidence proving a crime occurred. But the combination of multiple independent sources, soil fibers, cell towers, cloud, video, anthropological, created a form of convergent evidence where the combined reliability far exceeded individual parts. This is also evidence of a new trend. Digital data leaves behavioral traces even without witnesses or direct cameras. Another important lesson is the value of periodically reviewing cold cases, not dependent on new physical evidence, but on changes in technology and analysis tools. The 2016 Cell Data Review, 2017 Video Enhancement, and 2018 Cloud Data Recovery show that cold cases are not endings, but states awaiting suitable technical conditions for further investigation. This is a model many agencies recommend applying to long-term missing persons cases. Finally, the Lena Mercer file shows that investigating nobody cases requires a different mindset from traditional homicide investigations. Without a body, investigators must focus on behavior, inconsistencies in statements, movement traces, data asymmetries, and outlier factors, rather than seeking an immediate conclusive point. The lesson from this case is every gap in a timeline is a suspicion. Every seemingly unrelated evidence must be preserved, and every digital data source should be backed up maximally from the start, because it may become the pillar for reopening the case years later. In summary, the lead investigator concluded that it was persistence, systematic approach, and the ability to integrate new technology that turned a seemingly forgotten missing persons case into a deterrent sentence, and a prime example of how cold cases can be solved in the modern forensic era. In the story of the Lena Mercer case, what lingers is not just the nearly decade-long journey to solve it, but also a profound reminder for American society today that truth often outlasts people, and justice sometimes requires time, new technology, and a community that refuses to give up hope. The fact that investigators persistently preserved soil samples, fabric fibers, and device logs from 2013, items that seemed worthless at the time, shows the importance of not dismissing any trace, no matter how small. In modern life, where everyone leaves a digital footprint on mobile devices, the story of how cell data and cloud data broke the case reminds us that transparency, honesty, and personal accountability are incredibly important. Evan lied about not leaving the house, but the device he carried told a different story. That's a lesson that truth, even when hidden, still leaves traces. The story also highlights the danger of trying to control the narrative by keeping a personal timeline like Evan did. An action meant to help cover up, but that became evidence against him. In today's world, where people are easily drawn into image management on social media, this story reminds us that inner truth matters more than the story we try to construct. On a broader level, the Lena Mercer file emphasizes the importance of community and steadfast legal institutions. Without the cold case team continuing reviews, without new forensic technology, and without the persistence of the justice system, the case could have been forgotten forever. In American society, where many families still have missing loved ones, the big lesson is, don't give up quickly when justice hasn't arrived. Truth may be slow, but when we persist, stay transparent, and trust in the power of the law, justice can still find its way back. Thank you for following the nearly decade-long investigation journey of the Lena Mercer missing persons case. If you want to continue joining stories like this with real investigative depth, please hit subscribe so you don't miss out. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring mysteries brought to light by persistence and justice.